Hi, everyone.
Hey.
So today I'm going to be having a debate slash discussion with Binyamin Tsadik, who, as many people would have known from his channel, is a big proponent, a major proponent of the objective personality theory,
Sure.
devised by Dave Superpowers and his partner Shannon. And it's a theory which has been growing in popularity, I think, over the last few years. And it's one which I have certain criticisms of, some areas of consternation. And in the same vein, I'd imagine Binyamin has certain areas of consternation about socionics. So I thought it would
Yeah.
be a good opportunity just to put our various metals to the test and see what comes out as perhaps either more closely resembling reality or just being comparatively greater in explanatory power for understanding different kinds of personality.
Well, I just have to say also, I'm not here representing OP in any way. I also
Mm.
have areas of consternation, as you put it, with
Yes.
OP. But
Okay.
but yeah, I don't. I think the purpose of any debate is to get closer to truth and to grow whatever community or system you have through it.
Mm.
And eventually, I would hope that if there are different systems, and as they get more and more true, they'll start converging onto a single system.
Yes. And I think that is something which I've probably already seen it to a degree in OP versus Socionics. There have been certain areas of similarity cropping up. I think that their Discord notifications still. Dang. I keep on I keep on forgetting to get it in the browser as well as the client. Okay, it's gone now. Okay. I found that what was I saying? Yes. That even though with objective personality, there may be areas where there's these overlap, these interesting areas where they sort of are chiming in the right note. They seem to be coming up later.
That's
And
that's that's the expectation, at least. If you were to build a theory out of scratch, you would expect it would start off kind of rough around the edges and eventually start
mm,
getting to some kind of truth. And if another theory also got to that same truth, then you would see that overlap.
yes, I think that is also an interesting point about the methodology of objective personality is that it started out with certain definitions or certain ways of framing, and it's moved forwards from that in terms of doing observations of different people in different situations, typing thousands of people. Now, you
Well, I
don't
think
agree with my
the sequence of events there is a little
definition.
bit different. They started out with definitions, sure,
Yeah.
but they weren't able to get the same type with those definitions. And they had to keep updating and modifying their definitions in order for them to actually land on the same type and actually be able to see things in reality properly. So the definitions, you could say, evolved because of the need for them to type accurately.
Yes. I think that does make sense. It's a good idea to go back to things and revise and tweak the structure,
Right.
the approach for theory, so that it makes way for new phenomena. One of
Hmm.
my criticisms would be that perhaps they may not have done enough of that. My reasoning being that the expansion of the number of types to 512 involves the addition of new concepts. For instance, looking at extroverted feeling and how that may be expressed in different ways in different examples. They had certain masculine differences and certain feminine differences. And to make sense of that, they had to add in there's a masculine extroverted feeling, there's a feminine extroverted feeling, and essentially dividing up many of the different functions into masculine and feminine forms.
So Socionics has that too with static and dynamic, right?
Well, not so much.
Yeah.
In that specific case, we would
The only
say that
problem
at
is
the
you guys
moment.
lock it.
Sorry?
The only problem with Socionics is you guys lock static and dynamic. You say that one type of function is static and the other type is dynamic, and that's just the way it is. There's no either or type there. And OP keeps it a little open. You can be or static or dynamic on any function.
Well, actually, okay, but let me just come back to that point on the masculine and feminine, then I can go to that
Well,
one
that's
as
what masculine and feminine
well.
is. In essence,
Right.
masculine is static and feminine is dynamic.
Okay, so what would you say is it about being masculine that makes it more static? And the
Well,
same for
they define it as being immovable. It's not like the traditional definition of masculine, feminine, like ancient 2,000-year-old, 3,000-year-old definitions. It's more like this new age definition of what masculine and feminine is. But it sort of works also about how someone comes off in a like you can realize that there are more feminine men out there and more masculine women out there. and they also see that predicted through which functions are masculine and feminine, which functions are dynamic and static.
Okay. And so by immovable, do you mean that they're not receptive towards the suggestions of other people in changing their position, their mind?
Also, yeah, one of the a little bit more stubborn as well. Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's not quite static dynamic. There would be more inert contact, what I like to call stubborn and flexible.
Sure.
But yeah, it's a slightly
similar.
different dichotomy. But in which case, in what way does that tie up to, say, being more traditionally masculine and feminine, or does it not at all?
Well, like the traditional definition of masculine is something that's overflowing, abundant. I guess it comes from the fact that the masculine seed is just overflowing and abundant, and the feminine has to take one and narrow it down. That's like the traditional West Eastern.
But in terms of, say, being more robust, more assertive, more dominant, that is that
yeah, I guess there could be that aspect as well. It depends on what function it's with, right?
And with feminine, perhaps in that sense, being a bit more compliant, a bit more higher in agreeableness. I believe that I would say in socionics, we'd simply say that's the use of extroverted ethics with the presence of extroverted sensation. So you take, say, an IEI, that would typically be the more feminine way of using extroverted ethics. It's more as assertive and brash with an intensive extroverted ethics. You take, say, an SLE, it can be far more stereotypically masculine. Take, say, like a
do you know anything about Aesop's fables?
Aesop's fables, a little bit, yes. I have
do you know the one about the willow and the reed?
Is that how, when you say the willow, do you mean the tree that won't bend and so breaks?
And breaks in the strong wind, and then the really weak reed sort of bends. So like that's the idea of feminine, is that it won't break in the strong wind. It'll bend and it'll weather out the storm.
Right. Okay. And are you talking about this in terms of someone and their personality, or are you talking about this in terms of the information itself?
In terms of the function itself and how strict it is with the information. Yeah.
I see. In which case, yes, then static dynamic does come in.
Exactly.
Fair enough. Now, in which case, why would it be that some kind of cognitive function, as I call an information element, why would that only be either one, or why would that not be only one or the other? Why would it be sort of mixes of both?
Okay, so I've got a theory. Can I pull something up? I just actually drew something on this. 1 second.
Do you want to share screen? So I can share that for you.
Yeah. Okay. Let me try that. Share application window. I guess I have too many windows open. 1 second. Let me close some things.
Okay.
I did want to maybe, if you want, maybe go into a little bit the nomenclature as well. At some point.
Feel free.
Because because I think there's a few things.
Interesting. And Duke Albro says in OP you have to have 2M and 2F. So it does not necessarily mean that instead of a dichotomy, it comes more of a tetrachotomy.
So can you see this? What I have here, for example?
Yeah, I can see that.
Right. So here's, like, this isn't OP official or anything, but okay. So here I'm thinking that like each function has maybe a spectrum of what it can be, what it can express itself as in masculine or feminine. And this is basically just Jung said, like, just an example, SE versus NI. So sensing is more masculine usually than intuition. It says this in cognitive types. So like, say there's this spectrum. So let's say SE is like really feminine in one person, and NI is really masculine. So then you'll get a very masculine NI and a feminine SE. But most of the time, the SE will be more masculine than the NI. Right.
And so why is that?
I think it's just the function has to have some level on this spectrum of masculine and feminine, on this left and right spectrum. It has to sit somewhere, and sometimes it will cross. It will reverse itself.
Okay, but why ought it to cross? Is it just something that you've observed, or is it?
It's something that I've observed. The why is really, I don't know, comes down to genetics, development, whatever you want.
Okay, and what does SE, when it's crossing over that y-axis, what does it look like?
Right. Okay. So there's a few people that I've interviewed that, yeah, I stopped sharing there. There's a few people that I've interviewed that have feminine SE, and they're really all over the place on the facts. They won't lock down onto a single fact. They'll bring a whole bunch of different ones. They'll forget them really easily. They'll come off like more any, from my perspective at least. I don't know how that works for someone who's using any, but for them, they're just more scatterbrained around the SE.
Right. Now that does make some sense, because assuming that extroverted sensation is more of an accumulative function, and we'd say, I think we both agree across our various theories that extroverted elements are more accumulative. It makes sense for them to have lots and also have a degree of rapid switching.
Yeah.
But in which case, if we see that, I'm not entirely sure if we're necessarily calling the same things masculine or feminine. It's more that they're switching of their own accord, and they can be a bit more impulsive, a bit more mercurial, perhaps.
Put it this way: the Socionics definition of SE is masculine SE.
Yes. Yes.
A feminine SE would not fit into Socionics as SE.
Mm. Okay, and when you describe that feminine SE, you say it's a bit more like NE in a way.
That's how it comes off to me, just because I guess I don't know, it comes off as more details, really scattered details, less focused. Yeah,
I think there's also a point there to look at in terms of differences between, well, what you call facts, and what I would say is more observations in the day-to-day. And it seems to me that what would you say would be a good example of a fact to you?
A fact to me is something that SINE is going to be using a lot. For me, there is no such thing as a fact. I don't consider anything a fact.
Although, when in the definition of extroverted sensation, I think didn't you provide the one where it is about facts, is about the collection of facts?
Right, but like the way that you use the word fact, I guess, would be more in an NESI way, where like.
What would that be? What would that mean?
So I've had arguments with people when they talk about what truth is, and for them, truth is a fact. That's what a truth is. And for me, that's not what truth is. Truth isn't a fact, and there could be facts that are false. There could be facts that are true. But whereas like an SI idea of what a fact is, it's always true. Like then it's not a fact if it's false.
So what would be an example of a false fact?
A false fact, anything. I could say the sky is green. That's a fact. It's false, but it's still a fact.
I mean, that could be a proposition, but why would it be what will make it a fact rather than a proposition?
I don't know. It's just the way I perceive facts on my axis.
So, so as in, so you say the way you see facts are propositions of reality.
Well, lots of times in history, people considered things facts, like all of the planets revolve around the Earth. The sun revolves around the Earth. It's a fact, and like that was just a fact of the day. Everyone accepted it as common fact. So I don't think any fact can actually be 100% certain or true.
I see. Okay, and I think that makes quite a bit of sense, actually. There's, at least in sociology, you have this idea that what we deem to be true is the narrative which is enforced by those with the greatest power. And that's something which can often go into more of the beta types, in which in those cases we say facts aren't about independent evaluations of reality and putting propositions to the test. It's about a set of beliefs that are whereby if you contradict those beliefs, there are consequences.
Yeah, I guess. Why not?
So, I could, yes, and yeah, Kat says quite rightly. Nietzsche talked about that. Yes, it's something which you do often see more often in the more beta types, where they see truth in that respect. And whereas if you take someone who's more extroverted, logic oriented, extroverted thinking oriented, perhaps we would say that that is where a fact is more something which you observe to work. But when we talk about facts, so we're talking about in terms of truth claims. Would you say that's right?
I personally don't see a fact in terms of truth claims or not truth claims.
Okay.
I see a fact as just a data point.
A data point. Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's not personal for me. It's just something. It's just one more data point that I can take into account if I want to. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a piece of information. Like for instance, there is a mirror behind me.
Yep. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, you could be using a green screen.
Yeah. Could be using it. It is possible I'm using a green screen. That's very true. And we could always doubt. And what level of doubt we then hold to be acceptable is a good question. Right. So, okay. So we take that as being a fact. So, and you say about people who can be very changeable and variable in those facts. Is it that they are doubting their own observation of reality?
I don't know if they're doubting. I think it might just be that they're doubting which ones are relevant to which situation, maybe.
Right. Okay. So they're calling upon a large variety of facts. They're still holding all these facts to be true, but they're bringing different ones into focus.
Right. So SE, again, I don't think SE would hold facts as truth. I don't think they would associate that as truth. Truth is what would be behind the facts for us.
Right. And what would be example of something behind the facts as being truth?
So say we observed 10 mirrors. We're talking about mirrors. And they're all using silver as a reflective surface. So mirrors are silver. That's a
right
sort of commonality between all the mirrors, right?
So it's the rule. There's the general underlying rules or principles on.
So I guess from your cognition, you would interpret it as a rule, and then from mine, I would say it's a concept of what mirrors are.
Isn't a concept though more of a more
for
to do
you,
with intuition?
Yeah, for you, yeah.
Okay, so how would a concept be something other than extroverted intuition?
Introverted intuition, yeah, very personal.
Okay, and I'm taking the example of introverted intuition, which is defined as an organization of concepts. Let me say the focusing in of concepts.
Yeah, a common concept that would apply to many different situations, usually.
Right. Okay. So in other words, tell me if this is correct. So you put together an example of truth by observing different situations and finding general patterns or a pattern which underlies those different situations, which seems to explain in different circumstances.
That's right. And the way I see it is more like a trying to find the perimeter of an object, right? And so let's say the object is fractal, because all concepts in some way are fractal. And so the more you zoom in, the larger your perimeter needs to be, because you get more and more detail. And like the perimeter of a fractal is an infinite length, basically, in mathematics. You can't. So that's basically what it feels like. You get more and more details, and then you keep refining and refining the concept to higher and higher definition.
Okay. So now, and are you inclined to then throw out the rules? Throw out the concepts each time a particular fact seems to contradict?
Right. So that doesn't happen. What happens is the concepts are usually refined. It's very rare that you would throw out an entire concept, but you could refine it and mold it and sculpt it to be more and more accurate to the facts that you are gathering.
I see. So the abstraction from the particular instances over time is something which you adapt and you refine. It's not necessarily thrown out entirely. It's not that there's a working hypothesis. That hypothesis proved wrong. Out it goes. Right. It's more of a like, okay, so it's sometimes this and sometimes it's not.
Whereas NE would just have no personal attachment to it, and they will just throw them out constantly. And okay, it's wrong. I got 10 more in my bag. Just keep throwing them out.
Interesting. That suggests like you're also buying into the static dynamic difference there, at least in regards to intuition. And that
that's just the subjective versus objective side of it.
Why would refining necessarily be part of the subjective as opposed to the objective?
Because subjective implies personal, implies a personal attachment. Subjective implies that what you have is just for you, and it's something that you're working on personally. And objective refines something that's shared, implies something that's shared between everyone, something that that has no personal attachment to it.
So, how do you explain the example of someone who has a set of propositions, something they hold very seriously to be their beliefs about how things are, and let's say they're proven wrong in those beliefs, and it's a deeply traumatic experience.
Yeah.
If they, and as a result, they sort of cast everything out, they throw everything away, they have a period of chaos in their life, and then they have to create a new structure for understanding how things work. That would be a complete throwing out, but that would still be something which is deeply personal to them.
Right. That would be something just like the willow breaking. It's usually happens to masculine introverted functions, and they will just basically stay strong against the wind as long as possible until they break. And they have to build everything new.
Right. Now, what I would have said is that would have been an example of introverted thinking, snapping and
or
breaking.
Feeling or sensing, and it could be in any introvert function.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting, because I would have thought that when it comes to introverted feeling, yes, that would make sense as well, more perhaps in the perspective of relationships. But in terms of how we frame and make sense of things, I would have said that at the end of the day, you're making decisions in terms of how those things fit together, and that you can be quite committed to those decisions, whether that's about this is how things fit together. This thing fits with that thing with that thing. I know that to be true and correct. Anything which isn't that is then deemed incorrect. Those sorts of.
So it's more of a long-term process for introverted functions to go through that. It takes time, and it takes doing the work in order to refine that. And usually by the time you reach, I don't know, your 20s or whatever, you have a firm structure on your introverted functions and not many things can come and shake it. Even if they're feminine, not many things can kind of surprise you on them. But things that do come and surprise you will modify them, but it won't change them completely, nor most of the time, unless you're talking about that complete restructuring thing.
And now, is that because it's become an article of faith, or is it because you've seen enough information to know that a new piece of information comes your way? I've already dealt with that before. I dealt with that criticism. That's not actually overcoming what I already know to be the case.
That's right. Yeah, something like that. Something along those lines. Yeah.
Okay. In which case, let me. So in other words, there are two parts here. There's the overall idea of how things are, and then there's the informing of that idea of how things are through the collection of factual information. Is that accurate? Okay.
Sure.
Interesting. Now, that sort of that suggests a degree of being dynamic, and then building up over time, and it not being all or one way. Halfway down the road, it wouldn't have been the set way of viewing things. It would have been quite different. It would have changed and revised over time. It does suggest it's something dynamic. At the same time, it's a conception of how things are in a more abstracted way, but it's also bolstered by continuous taking in of factual information. Agreeing with all that?
I think all things are static and dynamic at the same time. To say they're all this is sort of wrong. But on the spectrum, some people have more dynamic and other people have less dynamic functions. Right. And that's really what OP does, is they look at people on a spectrum and they say, okay, well, and then the other thing is there's always a power struggle internally between masculine and feminine, is that it's masculine usually sort of puts feminine on the back seat all the time. And so that also you can see in someone that one function is taking more of a backseat, not because it's an inferior function, just because it's a feminine function. And so
Right.
it adds to the depth of the type to see this kind of dynamic take place.
That's interesting. I definitely do see that what you describe again as dynamic. It also seems to me, I'm still not entirely sure where the introverted thinking is in this,
So
because
my personal introverted thinking is masculine,
right,
which means my extroverted feeling is feminine.
right.
And so what you'll notice because of that, I'll be more agreeable, less aggressive on the front end. But if you push me too far, you'll see that cat energy come out. You'll see that masculine thinking come out with strong swings,
Right.
sort of thing.
Right, I
which
see.
You should try to be doing right now in our debate. Just push me to that point where.
No, I'm trying just to understand and make sure I've got a fuller view. Okay, that also makes sense to some degree. Yes, it does. It does sound to me like. But you say okay, but in which case, if you're saying that your use of TI is masculine, you describe as more dynamic a process for coming to understanding how things fit together. Where is the TI playing in your formation of understanding?
So basically, if my thinking is challenged, you'll see that it's masculine. You'll see that it won't move. Like
yes,
my decision, right. And you'll see a feminine thinker, if their thinking is challenged, they'll be more open to re-examining and taking in someone else's thought process, even though they might be thinking dominant.
So they'd be more open to new possibilities once that's offered.
They'll be more open to reinterpreting the data that they've interpreted.
Okay, now this makes sense. But I also see a difference here, that when you talk about feminine and masculine, you're talking in two different ways. One about the person, how they use it, and in another way, you're talking about the information itself, the cognitive function itself. And that is what seems interesting to me. Is just the cognitive function itself detached from any particular person? Is that something which is innately feminine or masculine?
I think you're right about that. The masculine and feminine is only in the way it's expressed and used, not in the essence of it.
Okay, now that is that's an important point.
Yeah.
And this is why I think this is perhaps correlates more in socionics with the stubborn and flexible. And I'll say why. Well, often we'll find, for instance, for myself, I think that the way you describe introverted thinking is perhaps more likely to be a bit more feminine than me.
Mine?
No, mine.
Oh, your introverted thinking is more feminine, you think? So that means your extroverted feeling would be more masculine than your introverted thinking?
Yes, I think so. Okay. And I'll explain why. You can feel free to disagree if you think.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't typed you. I don't know.
I'm trying to. I like the idea of understanding how people think, understanding the structures, and the idea is that I'm looking for a good reason to perhaps change my mind one day.
Mm-hmm.
I just need it to line up in a way based on what I've put together already, what seems to make sense already. I need the ideas to be more resplendent for me to jump to some new framing. At the same time, where I'm most actually quite stubborn is when, say, there's a group mood going on. There's like a vibe, there's like a feeling around me, and I'm not the one involved in the creation of it. Okay. It's not that I reject group moods. I like to create my own societies, like to create my own group feelings. Right. And so if I'm not the one being involved in creating that, I feel I end up becoming more of a rebel than actually a compliant follower. Now, this is something we would explain using inert and contact, or stubborn and flexible. And we'd say that, now we'd say that the creative function, the second function for any type, would be flexible, whereas the mobilizing function, a bit like the tertiary, the third one down, that one would be more stubborn. Now,
which is true in your case.
Yes, right. That it does work in my case.
But in my case, my SE is masculine.
SE is masculine. Okay.
Right, and it's actually common. There's a few ISTPs in the group who are MF. They have masculine SE.
Right. So how does the masculine SE show for you?
I'm very sure of what happens. I'm very sure of reality. I'm very sure of what I witness. I strongly resist like gaslighting, for example. It would take let's say I were into a magic show and I saw something happen. It would take a lot for someone to say that I saw it wrong or something like that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. That would sound to me like it's very much sure on a more intellectual level. This is the case. This is what happens.
Cognitive level, yeah.
What I understand to be. And what I would have been expecting for a more masculine use of SE, it could be the differences between the two different theories. But what I would be expecting is someone who needs the things around them to be a certain way. There's a certain stubbornness over it. My fiance is a good example, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also my parents are another good example, despite them both being very different types.
Are they using SE?
Oh,
Your fiance is using SE?
Well, the idea is that in socionics, at least, both kinds of sensation are going to be inert, and the same thing with all the others. So for me, both kinds of thinking would be more flexible. Both kinds of intuition more inert. Both kinds of feeling would be more inert, and both kinds of sensation be a bit more flexible. They work together in that respect.
Yeah. Here's a question. So where does Socionics pull all this from? How does Socionics come to these decisions?
Well, it comes to decisions by partially observation of people.
Okay. Who does the observation?
Making sense of it.
Who codifies it? Who does all these observations?
Initially, it was also Augustin Viciuti and another sociologist in Ukraine, in Russia. And the idea is that they're putting it together, they're refining the model. If things don't make sense, we can then update it, we could change it. One thing which I changed was about mental and vital, about what is conscious and unconscious. It seemed to me, from actually understanding different types, that this idea of a conscious and unconscious doesn't really come through. We can think about the other information elements based on how we defined it. So does conscious and unconscious really necessarily work? And we were thinking about what could another definition be, which could make more sense, which would allow the theory to fit together better, allow the theory to work better for our understanding. Now, it happens to be that with inert and contact, or I prefer to call stubborn and flexible, that seems to work so far from what we've seen. The different theoretical definitions seem to work further when we start to look at different types. And going back to the point about the contact or flexible sensation, we find that, at least with my mother, my father as well, and my fiance, they are very particular about certain things in the environment, the physical, real environment pressing on them or irritating them. They need things to be a certain way. A certain noise, they will not put up with that noise. There's a certain way they want things to be in their immediate, concrete, real environment. They're very stubborn over that being that way. And I can't sort of change that thing.
Yeah. I can get that way too sometimes.
Okay. I found for myself, people can change things physically around me, and for the most part, I don't really mind. Usually, I go along with it if it's positive. Something can be negative, and I can suffer, but I don't particularly prefer.
Yeah, it seems like your NE is more masculine, anyways, so that would make your SI feminine.
Well, yeah, and it makes sense for me because my NE, my intuition in general, where I want things to be going in the long run, what possibilities I can see and want to explore, both of those things, I find once I've reached that point, I want to be calling the shots in that. Where is it going? What's important? What's interesting? What's unusual? What is worth looking at? That is where I'm far more stubborn. It's far harder for me to change my mind of where I'm going. What's it all for? What's it? Where's the potential there? And I'm far less likely to change my mind about this sort of day-to-day stuff. I mean, you take example, someone who's also intuitive, but say an EII. Again, they can be very hypersensitive to small changes in their environment. They can become quite fragile when things change. Not so much for me. Now, would you say that that's something which then changes? It can vary within the type.
So, it sounds like what you're talking about is again feminine SI with you.
Yeah.
And I've seen people that are NE dominant that are most NE dominant are feminine NE. Most of the ones I've seen. It's more rare to have someone like you who has a masculine NE.
And what does that look like in terms of feminine NE?
Feminine NE, again, like just tons of ideas, tons of uncertainty about uncertainty, I guess. Like any in general is going to be examining the uncertainty, but they're just anyways completely vocal about it, and I don't know, overflowing with it in a way.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're vocal, they're overflowing with it. They are presenting new NE to the environment. They're trying to bring that in. They don't want to, they don't want to be forced to close the possibilities they're opening. For me, if something is worth keeping open and looking at, I won't be looking to other people to shut it down. I want to keep that idea and possibility open.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is that masculinity, at least by its definition. There is that proactive, I want to keep this over. I'm not just going to go along with you shutting down my possibilities. That's an important thing to me.
Yep.
I want to keep that open. I want to give that thing a chance. So would you say, and you're saying that those who are a bit more feminine NE aren't particular about possibilities being shut down around them?
I can't really speak for them, but from what I've observed, they just seem like they will, be more free about possibilities and probably won't take it as personally if you shut down a possibility or.
Okay, but that is interesting. It would
just, you have to ask them though.
Okay, I have to ask them, and that's fine. I think it is the point that if someone's NE is in that first position, if it's the main lens for which they see the world around them, it's their main point of values, the main point of importance. It makes sense if someone sort of starts to, close that down, starts to reject that, starts to, deprive people of those possibilities, that there'll be some sort of resistance, because that's the main thing they're about.
Yeah.
Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. But again, I'm not using feminine NE, so I don't know. I can't even simulate it. But like, I do see there, some of them are good at locking on to positive possibilities. Others are good at keeping all of their possibilities open. Some of them get stuck in negative possibility circles. So
when you say negative possibility cycles, in terms of worrying about how things might go wrong.
That's right.
And why would that necessarily be a leading or savior, the top savior, extrovert intuition?
Okay, so the word savior just means that you feel more responsible towards it, that you feel actually responsible towards it. It doesn't, right. It means that it's hard for you to let go of it because you feel responsible to it. It means that if it has to be done, you are going to be the one that wants to do it for others.
Okay.
Because, you feel like it's your job. It's your mission in the world.
I mean, I know watching Dave's video, he did quite clearly frame it in terms of the saviors being more positive and then demons being more negative. But maybe you disagree with that.
I don't know. Maybe the video you saw, he could have. Generally, okay, this is what I've come to. This is what also I've spoken to Dave a lot about this as well. They come to the same thing, is that why are there cognitive functions in the first place? And I keep coming back to the idea of pleasure and pain. That the reason that we have cognitive functions at all is because we can get pleasure and pain from those functions. And so the dominant function will have this immediate pleasure effect, and we'll keep going back to it because it'll keep giving us that little temporary fix, like the little cigarette that you keep wanting to smoke all the time. And then you won't be because you're using it all the time, because you're getting all the pleasure from it, a failure doesn't really bother you as much in that function. Whereas where the inferior function would come in is you won't be getting that little momentary pleasure from it. You'll be getting momentary pain from it. You'll be afraid to fail at it. You'll be pushed away from it for that reason, because the failure is actually a source of a lot of pain.
Okay.
But in the long run, if you're able to overcome that pain, you'll get this really long lasting pleasure from having overcome that pain.
So that lines up quite well as well with our idea of a suggestive function.
Right.
And this idea that is something which you do care about, you do value. And so, and when it can go very wrong for you, it can be very painfully go wrong for you.
That's
right. It's something which you care about at the end of the day. And you might need a bit of help in reaching a more positive experience of it. And same degree with the what we call the mobilizing function, it'd be like the tertiary. Okay. One thing I'd like to.
So, yeah, just before you say, so just to answer your question about the positivity and negativity in that first function, even if there is that negativity there, it's not going to be from a position of pain. It's going to be from a position of being responsible for the negativity there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And where does this idea of responsibility come from?
Again, it's just OP, but also it's. I think the functions you can put onto any functions are I guess they have an essence to them, and it's something that we can't really see, but we can apply the essence to something in order to see how it expresses itself.
Right.
So if you see how the functions express themselves onto the plane of responsibility, for example, so you'll see that the dominant function is going to be more responsible and the inferior less responsible.
Okay.
And you could do the same thing with other planes of application to see how they play out.
But that's the thing, like the reason I asked that question is there are lots of different terminologies used in OP.
That's right, yeah.
Certain different concepts. Now, what caused these concepts to be used in the first place? Say observer, decider, the use of the different animals such as sleep, consume, blast, play, and also the idea that you got double deciders, single deciders, etc. What caused, out of the vast range of different potential facts there are and observations, what caused someone to draw up a line through the constellations in that particular way?
So this is, again, you have to go back to Dave and Chen and how they were trying to type people.
Okay.
And they needed to use what works. They would try things all day. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is it. It was just really trial and error over and over again until they found something that actually worked. They were actually able to catch people's types and get to the same type using these concepts. But observer and decider is Jungian. It's just, judging or perceiving functions. It's just they renamed it.
Well, if you are calling it in terms of judging and perceiving, and then you go to say observing and introverted observing, and you say the introverted observing is your organizing of information, that does seem a little bit odd, because when I think of organizing, and if you disagree with me, and if other people watching disagree, I'd say that organizing, when you see things lying in some sort of disorder, and you're applying a schema to those things to arrange them in a certain form.
Sure.
And if you're applying that schema, that would suggest to me to be a use of something more judging, more deciding. There is a decision being made in terms of how it should align, and then that is put onto the how things are and arranged according into that way.
So this is something that OP and I just understand in general that functions don't work on their own. You can't have a judging function working without a perceiving function, and you can't have a perceiving function working with a judging function.
Correct. Yeah, I agree very much.
But so when the judging function interacts with the introverted perceiving function, it will be organizing or using that organized information.
Okay, but if we're talking about just a definition of what is, say, if we're talking about an example of introverted observation,
that's
it
right.
shouldn't really depend which other element it's working with. We're trying to talk about the thing in and of itself, surely.
Right. So the thing is, talking about anything in and of itself is next to impossible. What they can do is they can see the commonalities between SI and NI, especially if they're using it as a dominant, and see what they're doing. And what they're actually doing, the SI DOM or the NI DOM, is constantly organizing that information. And
what do you mean by organizing?
So again, that's up to interpretation. Also, depending on the person, they'll be doing it differently.
Right.
But there is that general theme behind it, that's what they're doing.
Right. I see. So there's a great degree of sort of some of the definitions it's taken from them trying to observe reality, trying to put together what makes sense in some degree.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So NI and SI, they see both organizing something.
That's right. And it connects to the need of certainty. It connects to, and this is really true with SI as well, because since NE is looking at that uncertainty all the time, the SI is going to be looking at the certainty side of the coin as well.
Okay. And why would you say certainty specifically?
This comes from I forgot his name. Tony Robbins. Interestingly enough, he has four human needs that he has in his system of typology.
Yeah.
And David Shen found that those four human needs map out perfectly to the four EP, IJ, EJ, IP temperaments.
When you say they found this, what do you mean by they found it? How did that?
They found that it maps. They found that there's a correlation between them.
But how do they do that?
Just by looking at the data and seeing that that all of the EJs fit into the certainty definition, all of the IPs fit into the significance definition, all of the EJs fit into the connection definition.
Okay.
And then all of the EPs fit into the, yeah.
But what was the methodology by which they did that?
Just seeing that was the correlation. That's what happened. They saw there was a correlation and they started typing people based on that, and it came out success.
Okay, so they'd already typed people, and then they're working out definitions after already typing people.
It was a process of 7 years. Again, right. You're going to have to ask Dave about the whole process, how it happened. No, but it was a process of 7 years of failures, lots of failures.
No, I get that there's going to be, at that period where you need to collect enough data to define your terms, to then collect enough data and then define your terms. As that continuous process. Socionics are doing a very similar thing, but it does make me wonder as to then the objectivity of the definitions one is using. And it also does make me wonder about the ongoing objectivity of these terms.
Right. Because so again, the definitions, all of their definitions are going to be somewhat objective because it's all dealing with expressions of functions. It's not dealing with the essence of what the function actually is. It's dealing, how can we catch this function? How can we use our skills to figure out that they're using this and not this? Right? How can we see both sides of the coin? And so what they're going to be doing is they're going to be giving definitions based on how functions express themselves. And they're not looking at what that means, what the underlying thing is.
But even then,
they have some of that too.
Even when you see these different phenomena and it shows up in a certain way, you can then approach that with your own biases to then say, oh, they're doing this rather than that. So how are they able to control against those biases?
How are they able to?
Yes.
So they have something called bias training. Also the same thing, they're on the same quadra. So they also have a bias of their same quadra when they're seeing things.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Also, I've noticed as well from talking to people that when someone's using a word, you don't know what that word means because it means something different for each quadra.
Yeah.
And so really tracking that is definitely a huge challenge. But I would assume it's a challenge in socionics as well. And socionics, I have yet to see any data set that people are basing their theories off of.
I mean, there is the idea of socionics that it's right similar to OP in that respect.
Yeah, there's similarities, yeah.
And I would say that one of the differences is that we don't necessarily claim to be objective. I think there are going to be many areas in which it becomes subjective. And we're aware of where that is. We're not going to make claims to be something different. But it does seem interesting that, well, I can ask you, have there been any peer-reviewed articles, anything like that, which we can actually say objectively, these studies have been done by David?
So I personally don't care, but no, there haven't been. But for me, the whole idea of academia has dropped the ball completely on typology. Academia has left a huge void in typology, and that's why YouTube is so booming right now on typology, because academia is not interested.
Okay, but do Dave and Shannon have the ability yet to have done their research? They said they've been spending 7 years in it, which suggests they have enough resources. Why haven't they, for instance, done some sort of study, tested their hypothesis, recorded the methodology, and written up, a 2,000-word essay on it?
Well, I know they're planning on it, but at the same time, they don't see the use for it at this stage in the game. There's no use. Also, for me personally, I don't see the use in it either until people start demanding the proof. Because right now, it's evident enough from examining the people that they type and examining their classes that they're coming at it from a place of observation. They're observing people.
It does seem to come to require a great leap of trust and faith in Dave and Shannon that their supposedly objective personality is indeed objective.
Yeah.
It is a very large thing to expect and demand of people to put faith in that.
Well, it's the same thing with Socionics.
Well, we're not
The difference is with them is you can see their process, especially if you're in their class. You can see the process of how they do it, and you can see that they are seeing things in reality. They're not just coming up with ideas and telling people to believe in our ideas. They're putting it to practice. And one of the things that I actually had a problem with was this exact issue, is that I didn't really see, there was a whole missing piece of the puzzle. Like, is this actually real? Is it actually happening in reality the way they're saying? And that's the whole motivation that I found in starting my interview process on all of the people that were objectively typed, was to actually investigate and see if they were doing a good job, if they were catching people, if they were typing people correctly, and if their theory is actually matching reality.
Yeah. It does seem to me that there is that difficulty. And certainly with Socionics, it's not as if those difficulties are different. I think one difference is we still wouldn't call ourselves an objective personality in that respect. We would say instead that we are trying to observe different things, we're trying to form different schema to understand, make sense of it. I think a slight difference in emphasis is
you keep locking onto the word objective. The reason they use the word objective is because a subjective approach would be someone typing themselves, and the only reason they use the word objective is because they're having someone else type you, and two people simultaneously typing you and getting to the exact same type out of 512. And so that's the objective side of it, where if the person can disagree all they want, this is, we're still seeing this objectively. We're still seeing this is the way you're behaving, this is the way you're acting. So you can claim to be an INFJ all you want, but no, you're an ESFP.
And we've actually been in similar situations where we found a few people who've been a bit sort of delusional, you might say, about what their type might be. It might be because they have a delusional sense of self. More often it's because they don't have a very good understanding of the system and how it can apply.
I just got a live stream with Taylor Flow State, and he mentioned you there. He said that if someone is really stuck on their type, usually you'll just go with them and be like, okay, that's your type, sort of thing, when you're typing them.
Well, it depends on what I can see.
Right.
It depends on what they've given me as they're typing, what they've said about themselves, what they've shown about themselves as well. There have been cases where I've seen someone who has acted in one way and said something quite different, and then I've had to make a decision on that basis. I'm more likely to give people the benefit of the doubt if I can't see anything lining up against it. But there have also been cases where I have talked to someone and their self-type has been completely different to what we've actually come as a conclusion. And you're thinking, okay, are we wrong or are they wrong? It can't be that both of us are right. So it creates a degree of discussion, a degree of looking at our own models, looking at their models, to try and see what makes sense. And it's very important, I think, when we talk about that tension between the person being typed and the person doing the typing, there is a possibility that people doing the typing can also be wrong. That can also happen.
Always.
And
it's a huge possibility.
Yes. And so,
especially since you get people going to 3 or 4 different people to type them, and they're getting different types at each person.
Yes, that can also be a difficulty. Now, it is important to build that sort of reliability. I wouldn't say reliability creates validity, of course. For instance, we've seen groups in the past, such as Podlair. Podlair was a group which existed a while back, and they were able to repeatedly, through looking at different visual signals, such as warm wizard hands, they were able to come to the conclusion people were certain types in their system. It didn't necessarily apply very well to how personality acted, about people's motivations, but they were to quite consistently look at a finite set of things to observe, and through training and over time alignment, they were able to align in their conclusions independently.
Yeah, that's the process of it. Yeah, that's the process of the double blind. Yeah.
Yes. Now it doesn't necessarily create validity. It is another. It can certainly help if you have reliability.
It's precision, not accuracy.
There's something on the way towards validity, which I think is a good.
It creates precision. It doesn't create accuracy.
Yes, But the point is, it doesn't necessarily mean much. You could have any set of phenomena, and you can reach a reliability in identifying those quite well. It does suggest that that phenomena does exist in some way. How it then fits into the overall model of personality, that assumption which still remains to be questioned, remains to be understood. And I think there is this, perhaps there's this issue with objective personality of, once they collect these observations, then going back and seeing how it can be better ordered, better structured. I think when you have those 512 types, it seems to me where they've not quite thought about how it all fits together and packs together in a way which is as unsuperfluous as possible. I think at the same time that they're embarking and finding things now, which Socionics has already had. As you said, a sort of masculine feminine differences, variability or stubbornness. Also how they describe some of the animals.
Yeah,
I think that's
one of the things with Socionics is that you can't ever really be sure that what Socionics is saying is real. And when OP comes out with the same results and the same conclusions, then you can be like, okay, well, two people are saying the same thing. There's got to be something to this Socionics stuff, at least these parts of the Socionics stuff, because someone is seeing the same thing in reality without stealing it directly from Socionics.
So what is it about, what you say about Socionics, which means you can't necessarily say that it's real compared to objective personality?
It's that there's no traceable element to the data itself. So like, for example, the dimensionality in Socionics, the dimensionality idea. So to me, it's just an idea. It's a nice idea. I don't see it play out in myself. I don't see it play out in others, but I'm still looking for it. But that's just one of the many ideas that come up in Socionics, and there's plenty of ideas there that aren't necessarily accurate to reality.
So when you say dimensionality, what specifics do you mean of that?
Like the 4 dimensions, experience, time.
Right. Okay. So what we would do is, the idea was created by Alexander Bukalov, and still something we're trying to see, does it actually work or does it not? What I would say to that is some parts of it does seem to work. Some parts of it doesn't necessarily seem to work. So for instance,
and it seems different in all people. It doesn't seem to line up with everybody either.
Well, no, what I would say is this: the demarcation between norms and situationality. That is where I think there's something true there in terms of distinguishing strength versus weakness. So, for instance, if we have this idea of strength and weakness, which doesn't seem to be something which OP focuses on as much.
Right, it doesn't at all. Yep.
Right, and the idea that you are more likely to be
based on development and growth. You can't know from someone's type their strength and weakness and things.
Okay, but in which case, when someone is quite young and they quickly get certain abilities over other people, how would you explain that in terms of OP?
So it could be it's just their dominant function, and they were given an atmosphere and an environment where they can use that dominant function and get good at it. Or it could be they were in a really horrible situation during their childhood, and they were forced to go into this function and get good at it. Like you could see an introverted thinker get really good with FE just because their parents are really conniving and deviant, and they needed to get good on that spectrum of things in order to get food or something like that.
Okay, but that's an important point there. That you're basically talking about dimensionality there. You're talking about, either it's their dominant function, which makes sense because they're readily taking in information, they're readily learning the schema for how to apply to different situations, whereas those where it's in a far lower position in the stack, they have to be put through very special situations, special pressures, where they're suddenly able to learn enough, have enough of a sense of norms and a sense of familiarity with these different situations to use it competently. And that's the basic point.
Like development is the same in all of the functions though. So like your dominant function, you'll be using it because you're getting the pleasure from it. It's going to be like promoted biologically to use that dominant function.
Right.
But you'll still develop just as quickly with your inferior function and just as strongly with your inferior function if you're forced to use it. It has nothing to do with dimensionality.
Okay, and that's because you're saying that. Is that because you're saying that you don't get pleasure from your lower functions?
That's right. Yeah. Well, immediate pleasure, you don't. But the pain is there from failing.
Why? Okay, I mean, that seems to be a very bold claim. How would you how would you observe that to actually be the case? That people don't get pleasure from their lower functions.
It's a bold claim. It's my own personal claim. It's a pattern I've been seeing, and it's something that's just the only explanation I can ever come down to. It's like all roads lead to Rome sort of thing. I keep coming back to this as the main cause of functions and why we use our functions and the way we use our functions. And I can't see any other first cause for them other than this.
Okay, so it's saying that you've never seen an example where someone who has a clear dominant function in one area can't then take pleasure in their lower function.
They can, but it's a long-term pleasure. It's not an immediate pleasure.
What do you mean by that?
So TI, for example, what I'm using, I would get immediate pleasure, and it's something that I've been desensitized to by now in my life. But early in life, this immediate pleasure always comes from me using TI, from getting little tiny successes in my TI, right? Whereas someone who was using FE first, when they actually go and use their TI, it'll be on a much bigger scale, on a much broader scale. There'll be a lot of pain there. It'll be very difficult for them. But when they finally do succeed, they'll get a huge payoff of pleasure once they've overcome that pain.
Okay. So that makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
So, but it seems to me that the reason why there would be more pain is because things are far more likely to go wrong. Would that not make sense?
Things go wrong for me all the time in the SE, for example. And I have no problem trying, empowering, and pushing through to get to what I want. The pain doesn't bother me in the SE.
You don't feel vulnerable in that particular area.
Right. And all of the NI DOMs I've talked to, they have this fear of failure in the SE. They have this fear of the pain and the failure that they don't want to even try to do anything until they're certain it will work. If it doesn't, then they'll get that pain. And really, all the advice I give to NI DOMs for that reason is just go fail. Just learn from your failures. And that's how you're going to get good at the SE. That's the only way.
Okay. Then I just need to very quickly go to the boys' room. I'll be right back. Thank you. Sorry about that, because I drank all my tea at once. Oh.
We got a chat here. I'm not in control of the chat, but I can look and see if someone said something. How's it going, everyone? Dave and Shen need a TI user to clean up their system. At the moment, it's just a TE approach of tacking new shit on. Sup, Wiz? Sup, Asura? Thank you, man. Hey, Dave. Good to see you guys all here. Good luck with your objective system, Joel. Conventional physics. What aspect of conventional physics? Because a lot of conventional physics is cool. I think it's become really an old boys club physics, though, that you have to be in the university game to be able to get access to it. Lower dimensionality means that you're less skilled with it, but for example, you're seeking it in others. You can escape the frustration of using it yourself. Quantum mechanics. I love quantum mechanics, yeah. We'll have a talk about that sometime. Message me, FO Sociology or whatever. Sorry. How's it going, Jack?
Yeah, I'm good. So it's interesting that what would you say causes someone to not feel pleasure in that lower area, in those lower functions immediately?
That again, this is all speculation. I can speculate if you want me to. It's just not a comfortable thing for TI to do, especially if I'm not using any. Yep.
No, fair enough. I just it does seem to sort of make sense to me that if something is strong, something that you do and you frequently have success in that area, when you feel you have a degree of confidence in that area when you're doing it, it was just to me that's something you derive quite quick pleasure from. Whereas when it comes to those lower areas, what we call the suggestive function, where you really care about it, it's important to you, but if you muck up, it can be the likelihood of mucking up is actually quite high for you. That can be a position of fear for you.
So honestly, I don't think that an NI DOM would fail in the SE more than an SE DOM. I think actually NI DOMs succeed in the SE much more than SE DOMs because they're afraid of that failure. They're not going to ever do anything until they know they'll succeed. So, but that's why they take so much time in order to get there, is because that failure will hurt so much.
So what makes something a dominant function rather than the other positions?
It just I think that's it. I just keep coming back to the same thing. It's that immediate pleasure. Like you know the Skinner box, basically, where like they push the button, the animals push the button and they get that reward, that instant dopamine reward or whatever. After a while they're pushing it and they're not eating anymore and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And because they're just pushing. Yeah.
Okay. So let's say you take, but it's an interesting point. This is where it'll be hard to prove either way, because it suggests, because I'd be using that as a means of typing people. There's these observable differences in capability, observable differences in confidence. For instance, if I take someone like a Donald Trump as an example, that's someone who clearly seems to me someone who's confident about making decisions in the here and now. Very good. It's what is immediately going on and dominating his physical environment.
Yeah. Internet's breaking up a bit. It could be me. I've been having trouble with the internet.
Sorry, I'm back.
Yep.
Okay, so I'd say, as an example, say Donald Trump, someone who's very confident, decisive in the immediate environment, and also seems to improvise in terms of dominating those around him, but clearly shows a lack of confidence in terms of long-term strategy, and ends up doubting a strategy, changing it up, mixing up, changing the people around him, which we've seen in the presidential campaign. Now, I would have taken that as an example of very strong extrovert sensation and rather weak introvert intuition. And frequently throughout his, many times people criticize him for being overly superficial. Is that data not useful in OP?
Yeah, it's completely useful data. Actually, OP typed them as that as well, SE DOM.
Right. But we see in that example where he does end up benefiting from the provision of a longer term strategy when he took on what's his name? What's his strategist later on? Can't remember the name of his strategist.
That's something that OP notices as well, is that since he's not confident or he's not responsible for the NI, he will hire someone else to do it. He'll get someone else to do it for him.
So you've also caught on to the idea of the outsourcing for suggestive functions. And the idea that it's okay, but I know I'm not confident enough in this area, I'm not capable in this area, so I can take it on.
It's not even confident or capable, it's feeling responsible for it. Like, I don't feel like it's my job, it's someone else's job. Someone else can do it.
Okay. And would you say that when it comes to the third and second, these vary in terms of their levels of responsibility?
Yeah.
According to the
so you mentioned earlier the idea of double observing and double deciding, and this is something that I haven't seen in Socionics yet. It could be, but is it?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
Yes. When you for instance, when you take betas and gammas, we would use the example of either there's an emphasis more on tactics or more on strategy. That if there's someone who's very good at confidently acting in the here and now, but they seem to have no sign of long-term strategy or actually thinking ahead into how things will develop, we see that as a clear asymmetry between extrovert sensation and introvert intuition.
Right.
And that will be a sign that in OP speak, that will be more of a sign of someone who is a single observer.
That's right.
Right.
But then that also means they're going to be double deciding, which means there's going to be a huge symmetry on their decider axis or judging axis.
We wouldn't say it's necessarily huge symmetry. It depends on development. It depends on how well they manage to develop that mobilizing side. We would expect people to grow the point where there is a very clear symmetry there. And we can also see that
if you were to hit them in either of their judging functions, they would be able to use the other judging function to hit back, basically.
Right. So, okay. What we would say in that respect is where do they tend to get hit and where do they tend to move once they're hit?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Now, this is where we find the 8 function model is more useful, because if you take,
Sure.
so what I'd say from that is take, say, a mobilizing function, the third one down. That's be a point where of more pride, something which someone is working on developing, getting better at. And when that's hit, say for me personally, for instance, when I'm in a social environment and I do a social faux pas, I get a negative emotional response. I'm likely to fall back on extroverted thinking, the more matter-of-fact way of speaking, the more about the information as I've observed to work. I'm more likely to fall back in that sort of.
So OP would say that you would go to your introverted thinking in that case.
Right. Okay. I mean, I can see introverted thinking there as well. Or I'd say that with introverted thinking, that's something which I would say I derive more pleasure from. The idea of seeing different phenomena, different possibilities, especially trying to make sense of them, how they all fit together. I enjoy that clicking together. But in terms of the factual knowledge I've accumulated to inform the different structures I created, I'd travel back more to that, because my knowledge and expertise, which I would have acquired over time, is less important to me, but it's something I can use to get by in a situation and also to fend off other people. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
What they would say is that if you're getting hit in your extroverted feeling, it wouldn't bother you as much as it would bother me, because you have that introverted thinking that could just basically say, okay, well, they don't care, but I've got me, right?
I guess maybe it does bother me a bit.
It does, yeah.
I do withdraw quite a bit. I go into more of more of a thinking position. That is more valuable to me. No, sorry, more reliable to me. And I feel that certainly with the extroverted thinking, I sort of take that for granted.
And similarly, if someone hits you in your introverted thinking, you could just go to your extroverted feeling to just laugh at yourself in the same way.
I don't really. No, I try to. I stay with thinking in that. I don't feel hit in that. That's not really something I tend to feel very hit in. If someone
But like
gives
if someone were to be like, "Hey, nice suit, it's blue," and you would be able to laugh at that. You would take it less personally.
Oh, someone looks at my
someone made fun of your suit or whatever. Yeah.
Why would that be being hit in thinking?
It would be being hit on your identity side.
Okay. I would say that my identity is just, I think it's more of some other people can sort of help me decide, really. I don't know. I mean, you say that introverted thinking is, I can see why you think that in terms of self versus tribe.
Right.
Right. Okay. Okay. I see. I wouldn't have put that as being more to do with thinking. So I think identity is more of a sort of subjective thing.
Yeah.
Personally.
Well, also thinking for you is subjective.
Well, I don't know so much about that. How do you define subjective?
Well, the Jungian definition, right? Introversion is subjective. Your thinking is TI. It's subjective thinking. Yeah.
And for me, and by reading what Jung said about that, he used the word subjective about sort of the resplendence of ideas, how the ideas seem to fit together and burnished in a way which can create excitement because of how it seems to fit together seemingly perfectly. I'm not sure that's the same as identity. Identity is something which is more felt in a more of a sentimental sense, isn't it not?
For FI users, sure. Yeah.
How would identity work in a more thinking sort of way?
So basically identity is our we also come up with values, but our values are logical in basis. And just basically all of our past decisions, all of the axioms we've gathered, all of the way we come up with solutions, all of that is connected to our identity.
Not so sure, but why would there need to be an identity there? Why do I need to be involved in this?
Because it's subjective. It's an introverted function.
It's subjective in that
Subjective is close to the heart.
It's
personal.
I wouldn't say it's anything to do with my heart.
Well, not physically, and
no, not even physically, not even emotionally.
Metaphysically, yeah.
Not even emotionally. Ideas. Well, when I think of the subjective,
well, ideas for you are objective. Your any is objective.
That's what Jung described about, which I think makes a lot of sense. The idea that this idea of resplendence, this idea of a different data points, they line up in a way which makes perfect sense, and which then, if something contradicts it, it looks ugly, it looks unpleasant, it no longer makes any internal sense anymore. That makes perfect sense to me in terms of introverted thinking. And it's the idea of things making sense, I think, is the essential point. But I think it may be conflating that with the idea of something being subject in terms of being quite personal and creating more of an emotional response.
So for me, my subjective function is Ni and Ti. So both of them are subjective. Both of them are associated with who I am, my identity. They're an accumulation over time. They're trackable through time. My SE changes all the time. I don't have a constant SE. So it's not me. It's just where I am. And my FE changes over time. It's not me. It's just where I am, what group I'm in. But it's my TI and NI that's tracking over time. It's continuous.
Why does your SE change over time if it's masculine?
Because I'm in a different environment. I'm in a different place. SE is what's here now at this moment. It's the reality that I'm faced with at this moment now.
Okay,
I can't gather any information from a past reality, only from a present one.
Right. So how is that then masculine? That it's changing over time.
It's just objective.
But you're more talking about it changing over time.
That's just the way SE works. It's not masculine, feminine. The masculine, feminine comes in with how stubborn I am about the environment I'm in at the time. Yeah.
Okay, so rather than being necessarily about changing, it may be more about accumulating, taking in more perceptions.
Also, but SE is just the moment. It's the here and now. It's not something that continues over time. For you, that would be the any. Your any will be the here and now.
I don't know. How do you describe any as the here and now?
I don't. I'm not an any user.
Okay.
It's my polar function. So
when I think of a here and now, I think of SE, at least the things around me, what's going on right now.
But the uncertainty in the here and now is going to be more the any.
What do you mean by the uncertainty in the here and now?
You tell me.
I don't know what it means. Honestly, when someone says uncertainty in here and now, I don't think of a here and now. When I think of uncertainty, I think of things which aren't here. I think of what could possibly be anywhere. Like we could be living on Mars in the next few years.
That's right. But that landscape is different now than it will be in the future. That landscape of any.
I could always go back to those possibilities. They don't really change.
That's right.
So I'm not sure.
But they do change based on your circumstance, based on where you are.
Right, but
and they're throwaways.
Okay, but this is what I say, that there's some of this language does seem a bit fuzzy in my opinion, from where I'm coming from, because when I'm told that I'm going to be perceiving something in the here and now as extrovert intuition, and assuming we agree enough on extrovert intuition to say it's more about possibilities and potential rather than the physical reality, I can look at my physical reality. I can see that there's a mirror behind me, there's a window. So I'm not. So this idea.
But for you, it's going to be more of a permanence. It's going to be this mirror was always there on that date at that time. This couch was always there at that date at that time.
I am not tracking that.
Yeah, because you're SI inferior.
Sport. Yeah. No, I'm not. I just know that right now there's a red couch which I'm sitting on.
Right.
I know that. I can see that. I can feel that. So what am I doing?
Yeah.
But I don't say if this isn't NE, and I wouldn't expect it to be NE.
No, that's not NE. No, that's you're pointing out the SE right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So why am I not using SE?
You could be using SE. I don't know.
Okay, but if I were to then go and use NE, wouldn't that be a bit confusing?
No, because the NE is focused on what isn't there right now, what
Yeah,
could be, right?
right. So is it possible for me to use both SE and NE?
Sure, why not?
Okay. Why then do we have only 4 functions in our stack rather than 8?
We have a focus on 4.
Right.
The other 4 are, we're not interpreting reality through them constantly. We can use them, but it would be like betraying our first 4.
This might make sense. I'm not sure it's about betraying the first
Yeah.
4. Like, I'm not constantly. That's the thing. I struggle with the idea at the moment, Binyamin, of constantly using my introverted sensation. What would that look like for me?
So, like, for example, your intuition is meant to be extroverted. It should be extroverted from your perspective. This is the should, right? If you were ever to use introverted intuition, it would be like going against the grain of what you're designed to do. It would be like betraying your extroverted intuition, betraying what it's supposed to be doing.
I can see that to some degree, yes.
Yes.
No, but why am I? Why would I not? Why am I? The idea of this is that with SE, that's somehow betraying my introverted sensation, which I'm
That's right.
constantly using. How am I constantly using introverted sensation?
So you probably aren't. Your SI is something that you had to develop and fight in order to
Okay, so I'm not
have a stable life, and you don't feel responsible for it either. Yeah, it's your main struggle.
I feel a lot of pain when my physical surroundings are uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
that does eventually start affecting my mood quite negatively. And
Yeah.
I found that, in a way, it's probably OP would agree with. I found great satisfaction by outsourcing introverted sensation
Okay.
to my fiance. But of course, what I'd say about that is it's not really about certainty. For me, it was very much about comfort and very much about sort of wellness.
So for an NE DOM, the SI is going to seem a burden. It's going to be something that's taking you out of your NE. It's going to be something that seems to enslave you and not allow you to have the freedom to do what you're supposed to be doing, quote unquote. And that's why it's something that you won't want to go into, because it's hard to let go of that NE. You have to let go of that to go to your SI.
Now, I often find that when I'm sort of in the mood for it, I guess it's I'm in the mood for it. I really want to immerse myself in that enjoyment of the moment, and in that sort of refining my senses to the point where things are just blissful. And when someone brings that to me, eventually it breaks me out of my chasing after new possibilities and ideas, different projects. It breaks me out of it and immerses me in the present, and it's a very positive experience. But I don't really have any sort of confidence to actually create those experiences for myself. When I realized I really liked the sensation of sneezing. So, so for a while I used to sit on my bed with a paintbrush and start putting out my nose to try and trigger the sensation of sneezing, because it was a pleasant sensation. And a bit weird to most people, but I'd say that's what I would think it's perhaps being introverted sensation. Would that be introverted sensation to how you define it?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Okay. Also, why would it be a why not? There are a few points where you have said a why not. It says you're open to alternative definitions, but it also suggests that you don't have necessarily a clear definition to say, no, it's not, it's this instead.
So the definition is like this target, and it falls somewhere within. So yeah, it could be, yeah, it could also fit into other targets. But for you, I could see that it fits into introverted sensation for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But why then do people talk about the organizing of our perceptions and sensations, about this pursuit of certainty?
This is how OP catches you. It catches you by doing that, by taking your environment and the sensory as personal, as something that's structured and ordered and I don't know, that it means something, that there's meaning to the world around you. There's meaning to the couch you're sitting on. There's meaning to the moments in your life.
I'm not sure if
You're
meaning.
more aware of it on a bodily level, on how it makes your senses actually feel. There's more of an eternal moment to it. They also catch you on the facts and the details, that all of your intuitions are only worth what they are because they're grounded in some kind of fact or some kind of detail that grounds the extroverted intuition, allowing it to branch from.
It's difficult. It sounds, what you're saying is a bit vague to me.
Yeah,
and I'm having difficulty linking it up to anything that I can remember, anything which I can see in some sort of way.
Right, it's demonstrative exactly of what SI and NE needs for SI. You need to have some kind of thing to ground you, to ground your understanding.
Well, what I like to do is to sort of think of, say, an example of how it might play out.
I don't know your life, man. You
No,
tell me
no.
better. Yeah.
How do you see an SI and say another type, maybe an NE lead? I don't have to be an NE. I don't have to be an NE savior in the OP system. I'm perfectly happy to be a different type in that system. But
I think you're a type in reality, and a system has to catch you in what you are.
Why do you think that types actually exist in reality?
If they don't, then what are we doing?
Well, we're trying. We're hoping. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it is.
It doesn't necessarily, no. But for all the evidence I've seen, it shows that type is a real thing. There is such a thing as type. Jung was correct in his assessment. I've looked up in a 800-year-old book that also they've described sensing, intuition, thinking, and feeling.
No, these concepts were around earlier.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
It is true in that respect. I
am
open to the idea, though, that people have different structures for trying to understand these phenomena. Some are probably better explaining it than others.
Right. Well, we're using these phenomena to understand the phenomena.
Yes,
so it's kind
of exactly.
Yeah.
But also that, I'm perfectly happy being a completely different type in a different way of trying to describe it.
Sure. From a different perspective, you look different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Right.
Yeah.
But even necessarily looking different, the baby seeing the exact same phenomena, but just simply categorizing it a bit differently.
Yeah. Also, it depends where you draw your lines in the sand.
Yes, that's true. Exactly. I agree on that point.
Yeah.
I find, although when you say that you see these fundamental concepts, why would then Dave and Shannon go so much towards double deciding, double observing, for instance, as their means of typing people in the coins, rather than looking to say intuition and sensation?
Okay, so let's say you saw someone as using NE and TI, okay?
Yeah.
Well, are they TI-NE or are they NE-TI? Which one? How do you sort them out? How do you know which one is preferable? Because they're going to be using both. They're going to be pointed towards both in some way. Which one is higher?
Now in that situation, yes, I would look for either the SI or the FE and see which one is showing up and which one isn't.
Right. So if they're easily able to go back and forth between the FE and the TI, they call that double deciding, and that makes them automatically an EP or an IJ. And then they're being an ETI.
No, but what I was asking is more, why did they start with that? For me, it makes sense that once I've seen the NE and the TI, I can then say, okay, knowing it seems to be very much a valued, strong use, I've already narrowed it down within the potential types there, perhaps two or three. I can then work out which one they are by using that concept of rather like double deciding or double observing.
Yeah.
So why start with that?
It'll show you what side of the map they're on. It doesn't matter where you start. They can start typing someone whatever they see show up first. If they see right away someone's double deciding, then they know they're EPIJ. Check. Done.
Right. Okay. But in terms of a double deciding, if you've got different cognitive functions in these limited 4 slots,
right?
Why would you expect to see the same phenomena or comparable phenomena across these different double deciders or single deciders? Why would
so I don't think they expected it. I think that's just they saw it happen consistently, and that's just what it is.
Okay, but what would it look like? What have they seen?
They see consistently in EPs that they're and IJs that they're double deciding, and then they'll see consistently in IPs and EJs that they're double observing.
Okay, and what does double deciding mean in a way which is intelligible, which applies across both TI and FE and also TE and FI?
That they're not all in on either self or tribe. They're able to go back and forth between the two. They're able to not take things personally if the situation requires them not to. They're able to, I don't know, to not take people as seriously, to trust that people will work themselves out. So that it's not their major concern in life is what people think of them or how they fit into the tribe or the social dynamics. Yeah.
So you'd say that, for instance, an INTJ, for instance, would be somewhere in the middle on self and tribe.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Now, what makes them more tribe rather than not tribe? What gives them
their allegiance to their allegiance is more to the systems, to the extroverted thinking, to making sure things work in the real world. That's where their allegiance is. It's more to it's less to their FI. It's less to their own identity.
Now, but what has that got to do with tribe?
So it's a tribe function TE. It's making sure that things work in the real world for everybody together. If someone needs help, if someone's trying to pull their couch out of the door or whatever, and then a TE user sees that, they'll automatically run to help them lift the couch.
Why does that follow from being emphasizing how things work in the real world? Why can't they say, I know how things work in the real world and screw everyone else?
Because it's a maintenance thing. It's a momentary thing. It's something that you have to keep updating constantly. It's something that the job is never done. Yeah.
But why people? Why do you need to go and help out people with that?
Because it's a system for people. They want the system they want everybody to be equal.
Why?
On the system,
but that's what I don't quite. Sorry, it's the connection's a bit funny.
Right. How would you describe TE then?
Well, I agree with quite a bit of what you said. That
right.
The idea of observing things, how they work in reality, checking the data, make sure it's working empirically, improving and working on those processes. Sure. And this idea that it's about what I've observed, how I can make it work better. No, fair enough. But why does that have anything necessary to do with people? I'm not really seeing.
Because it's not fair that it works for just you. It's not fair that it works for just him. It has to work for everybody. If something is working for one person and then everyone else is suffering because it's not working for them, then the TE is going to jump in and say, hey, this has to work for everybody, not just for you. So it's also on that connection scale.
But that's a huge jump. Why would you get to it's working really well, to this must work for everyone? It's unfair if it doesn't work for anyone. What's this fairness from?
It comes from the TE. It comes from, so like, let's say you're on a river, okay? And you're taking all of the water into your little nook off of the river. And then people downstream aren't getting any water, right? And so the TE will come in to try to find a solution that works for everybody, not just works for one person.
Why?
Ask them.
but the point is, I know people who have.
We've got a few TE people here in the.
I mean, I can look, for instance, I can think of plenty of examples where that. But why is it paused? On a bit. Hello. Okay, Binyamin's paused a bit. Let me Let's wait a bit for him. See if anything else is working. Okay, let's wait a little bit. Okay, yeah. What questions can I take from other people? Good point, Kat. Let me take a look what people have asked already. Oh, it's gone. Any questions from anyone? Why would TFF? Yeah, exactly. Why if you're observing something to work, will you necessarily then move to? Now, it's fine. Let's wait for Binyamin to come back so we can get to the truth of this. But yeah, and it does seem to me that there's sort of like a gestalt here, which doesn't seem entirely consistent. But yeah. Does anyone have any questions for me? Maybe OP people. Any OP people watching? Do you have any questions for me? Kat asks, so far do you see a lot of similarity definition-wise? I see a lot of the same phenomena coming up in perhaps different ways. So I think there's a lot of looking at the same phenomena having different structures. I think that where we're really getting to the nub now is about the this sort of double decider, single decider thing. I think that's where it gets very different, because the way what OP is doing is it's starting with what we call, say, temperaments: introverted, judging, extroverted, perceiving, etc., and then working out what cognitive functions fit into those slots. And I would say that seems to be erroneous, at least from my point of view. That it's back. Okay. And that I'm saying the difference there is that, how do you know what to look for if you haven't yet pinned down what the information involved is? Just looking at the general shadow of it, if anything. Right, I'm going to add Binyamin in. Binyamin, hey. You all right? All good?
Yeah. I opened my cell phone connection. I don't know. The internet here crapped out.
Oh dear, sorry about that. But yeah, so this is the struggle I'm having. I'm still. It's very clear to me, right, how extroverted feeling fits the idea of tribe, the idea of this sort of how people are feeling, how what the mood is, and tapping into that and being part of that continuum. It seems that take extroverted thinking, any connection you could possibly connect with this idea of a tribe seems incredibly tenuous.
Right. You ever play any video games like World of Warcraft or any I don't know, those old strategy games, whatever? Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, you know how you go and you build a building and then suddenly all of the peasants run in and start contributing and building on that building to make it build up? So that's how TE looks from my perspective, is that they're all working together in order to solve something.
And this idea of sort of teamwork can make a dream work.
Right, sort of thing, yeah.
Right. I don't know. I've come across too many people who are very much about how things are working, what are the facts, who actually say, I don't care about anyone else. They're going to get in the way of my independence and what I want to do competently. And I just want to look at the facts, not about how people feel, and screw other people because they can, deprive me of what I'm trying to do.
That's right. As long as everything works, as long as society's working, right? And so they'll find the connection, not through the way people feel, but they'll find the connection through working together, correcting things, making the world function.
I just don't understand why it has to be about society. I mean, I see what you mean. You've taken sort of like a nice sounding idea. It's a nice sounding idea that extroverted thinking would be in some ideal world about, people coming together and working. Although even then, that's not necessarily extroverted thinking. It's not an observation of how things are working and trying to make it better. That's everyone getting your role and trying to, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do this, and let's all come together and, have a good experience together. Well, I'm not.
Yeah, I don't think it's about the experience. I think it's just that society runs, and the systems in society, we upkeep them, we keep them, we maintain them.
Okay, even this idea of the systems in society running, right? Now, you could have a system where it's about the structure. It's about, say, the set of rules, whatever it is, and the idea of things running is that those structures aren't contradicted, and any contradiction can be sort of phased out, taken out. Or you can have an approach which is very different, where things are working as well as they can. We're continuously improving, continuously updating. Now, I would say that that latter one, I'm not entirely sure how that necessarily involves appealing to society. I can see how it can end up helping out society.
Yeah.
But I don't think how it's sort of intrinsic to this idea that continuously updating and making things improve works. We came to this idea of tribe, I imagine, from Jung, right? And this idea that things are either objective or subjective, and when it's objective judgment, it has some sort of external placement. Does that make sense?
I guess that's not how I see objective, but I'll go with you on this for now.
Okay, but why I say that, because with extroverted feeling, it's quite clear of Jung. It's about, you know, the sort of group opinion. You know, is he a suitable match?
Yeah, I guess you could say it's seeing things on a spectrum as well, seeing the spectrum of feelings or the spectrum of thoughts, whatever you consider thoughts to be. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when I think about this idea, for instance, of the system working for everyone, coming out of everyone, you know, contributing together to make things better. When it comes to extroverted thinking, that doesn't seem to come across at all in what Jung's saying. You're talking about these are the facts, these are how
it's quite harsh with extroverted thinking, yeah.
Yes, but also when I think of introverted thinking, and I'm thinking, if I have this perfectly put together idea, this theory, that everything sort of fits together, makes sense in my head, it's resplendent. Right. It doesn't necessarily have much to do with evidence. It what seems to be a perfectly bright an idea, and I'm enthusiastic about the idea. I'd want to share that with everyone. Is my TI now not appealing to the tribe in some way?
Yeah, I guess. Why not?
And for you, I think most people would say you're a TI person. Don't you also like to, you know, interact and show your ideas and reflections of others? You do it quite a bit.
Yeah, I do it now quite a bit. But yeah, no, it's definitely more. What I'm doing more is not sharing my ideas. I'm doing more is giving other people a platform. I'm using my FE more, doing things for other people rather than doing things for my own ideas. And just as a result of that, people start caring more about my ideas. And that's sort of the way, the inverse way that things work. Yeah.
Okay, but why do it?
Why do what?
Why share your ideas at all? Why should people care about your ideas? Why do you want that?
Because I think they're good ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, but why should other people have anything to do with that?
Because they could be good for everybody. Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Yeah. Isn't that basically what you said about extroverted thinking?
No, it's not the same, because extroverted thinking is going to want to more maintain the systems that are there. If they catch on to a new system from TI, if TI comes up with a new system, or they themselves figure out a new system that's working better for everybody, they're going to want to implement it and maintain it as well.
Why is conservatism essential to extroverted thinking and not to introverted thinking?
It's not.
But you said it's about preserving the systems which are already there. Why is that essential to extroverted thinking? I can see why it might end up that way, but why is that essential? Why is that implicit?
It's because they're just more aware of the systems that are functioning around us. They're more responsible to them to make sure that you know, something doesn't get clogged up in the machinery, to make sure that it just keeps turning.
Right. You know, okay, that makes sense. That there are processes around them, and that they want things to continue working. So if you're improving something, it's a waste of effort, it's a waste of energy a waste of our resources to sort of tear it all down and start afresh. When we can find a perfectly good fix which makes it work better. That's fine. And that makes sense in terms of seeing things in terms of extroverted logic, especially, I might say, with introverted sensation. But what I don't necessarily hear is this idea of but does he how it necessarily applies to the idea of a tribe? Why?
Because systems are only in place because we're all accepting of them. Why is money valuable? It's only because you will accept it as payment, right? Everyone is accepting of the system. It's something that's good for the whole tribe. It's not a system. I don't know. They could theoretically come up with a system for themselves in their own house, but then that's for their own tribe.
Yeah, but then when you take introverted thinking, you say you have good ideas. Are they not good for everyone, or are they only good for you?
Yeah, they're good for everyone, but a TE would be very resistant to it because they won't see how it's working. They won't see how it could be too much of a leap forward for it to be.
But did you see that? That's the contradiction there. That the contradiction is that you're saying that TE is the main reason why TE is an idea example of tribe, and so at the basis it should be about what works best for everyone. So, if a TE type should be evaluating the ideas you're presenting in terms of how good they are for everyone, but you're saying no, they're more likely to reject it, despite it being good for everyone, because they don't see how it actually works in a more mechanical way, a more practical way. That suggests that they're two completely different, potentially independent maxims or motivations that you sort of smudge together for understanding.
Yeah, no, I'm not seeing the contradiction. I'm seeing like TI doesn't have to be doing something that's good for everybody.
No, I know TI doesn't have to be, but why? But why does TE have to be?
It's just I don't know. It's just the way I see it working. Do you not see it working that way?
I know many examples of extroverted thinking people who see themselves as, no, it's me, what I can do competently, how I can make things work better for myself, and certain people who I know very well and I care about, individuals, people who have relationships. A lot of extroverted thinking people who I've met, they don't necessarily see it themselves.
So maybe you've categorized them as extroverted thinking when they're actually introverted thinking?
Oh, no, I know you're going to say that, but
I am? Okay.
They're using is about how I can make this work. Well, I'm looking in terms of facts. How can I adapt? How can I adjust? How can I make it work?
Well, I do that too. Does that make me extroverted thinking?
Well, I mean, I think it could very well be.
Yeah.
It depends on what you're actually doing. It isn't what we're actually observing you to do. We can take what you're talking about as a question of what you're actually doing. I mean, if it's the question of someone actually adapting and adjusting their viewpoints based on what they've observed to actually work in a practical way, they've tested it, they're trying out hypotheses, they're interested in, okay, let's put this to test.
It's coming up with solutions.
And
it's
also
not changing my viewpoints.
Yes, but
it's constructing from my viewpoints.
Yes, but the idea is that the viewpoints aren't the important thing. It's about what they think works, and what works can change from one situation to the next. It's that pragmatism.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually matter about the supposedly resplendent, burnished ideas of how everything fits together and makes sense is unimportant to these types. It's more about how does it work? Does it improve the outcomes which I want to create? Is it efficient? Is it more, or is it less efficient? Is there a better way this could be working? But I've seen people who do that who have no connection to this sort of broader society. If they do have any sort of connection to helping out in society, it's about how can I be better? How can I work on developing my own way of working as a person? And I've managed to attach that to working better in society because it's far less effort to do that than not. But so that's not to the point.
All of the TE people that I've met are all concerned as well with the validation of others. If someone is in need of help, they'll be the first one there to help them.
Right.
They're actually very generous and very kind people, even though they're not using FE. They're using their thinking in order to connect with people.
Oh no, I think certainly the kind part makes sense. I'm sure you see many kind examples and across all types, but normally it's because the area of kindness is more restricted towards people who have an existing relationship with, rather than this general group of people who they don't know, who they don't care about, who have never met.
So I've seen, so one time my kid got locked in the car, for example, and a TE user came and he automatically took charge of the situation. Let's get your kid out, sort of thing. Like this is what TE does. It comes and it's what's that?
Who wouldn't? If I were to, I in the same position.
But like taking charge, taking over, like taking,
would you
or the
find a kid trapped in the car?
Yeah, obviously, but this is something that is just second nature to them. Where
why is it any less second nature to you? Would you have to?
Because I would be like, I would look at there, I'd be like, okay, I would ask them maybe, do you know, you got this under control? Yeah, okay, I'm gonna go to work now, sort of thing. Or I'll be here if you need assistance. I'm here to help you. I can help you think of solutions. But this is something that it's more proactive. It's more running to help someone in need of TE. Like they're using their TE to solve problems, to fix the world around them.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But this idea, okay, of fixing the world around, not necessarily society, not necessarily the tribe, it's making things work better in reality.
For everybody, not just for them, right? It's a very selfless kind of thinking.
I'm not sure why introverted thinking is any less selfless.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I mean,
but it's
introverted thinking
it can be selfless if we direct it that way, but it can also be completely selfish.
Yeah, and I think why can't extroverted? The same way, why is it extroverted thinking can't also be selfish? You're using examples where it can happen one way or it can happen another. And the point is, the reason why I'm poking at this is that the whole basis of how objective personality starts off in its typing, its biggest coin, is looking at these double deciders, these single deciders.
No, I get the reason why. I get the reason why you're poking at it. Yep.
If that essential supporting point is so tenuous as it's been shown to be in this conversation.
Well, I don't know also that I'm the best person to talk about it because I'm not using TE, but just from what I've observed, this is what TE does.
I know there's always also the problem.
It's getting things to work for everybody, not just for themselves.
Yeah, no, okay, fair enough. It does leave a lot of doubt. It leaves a lot of reason for skepticism in the theory, which, as you said before, you know, the word is objective personality, but there have been no peer-reviewed studies, and it's based on our trust in what Dave and Shannon can do and what they can demonstrate through their own classes. Which,
for me, it's based on trust in what you can see. It's based on my understanding of it. Like I said, I have my own qualms with it, especially with the animal system. But in terms of their understanding of what TE is, I don't see any problem there.
I mean, I know for myself, just talking about animals, right? Talking about, say, blast or consume. I think I've been typed as my main animal being consume. I think based on how they've typed me from a distance, which I think is fine. But I can see myself doing blast things, but apparently I'm not meant to be blast. For instance, I learned a bit about OP, but I used a lot of our conversation to find out more because I hadn't learned everything I could about OP. I really want to get into sort of debate and talking about it.
Yeah, I realize that you're not really debating, you're more learning now, but yeah.
Yeah, I am learning. I'm debating a bit, like more recently been debating, but most of it has been more learning and seeking to learn because I'm also interested in where I might also be wrong and where I could also maybe change my mind in some ways. But the point is, I do find myself doing lots of blasting as well. I have these YouTube channels because I can go on and I can talk about things in front of people. I'm blasting now, I'd say. So, but apparently I'm not meant to have...
No one said you're not meant to use blast. It's just what your last animal is the purpose more than anything else. So it's what are you going to do? What are you going to do first before you feel confident enough to finally go out and blast, right? So you're obviously never going to go talk about something that you know nothing about. You're going to obviously have to consume about it before you blast on it.
But the way the blast was described was that there's almost minimal, there's only a little bit of taking in of information and learning and satisfying any conditions because you just want to go and tell and share.
So it's like a bucket, right? You have a blast bucket and you want to go out and blast everything with that bucket, but you need to fill it first. So someone with blast first is going to have that bucket always filled. They're always going to have something to say. Someone with blast last is going to spend most of their time filling that bucket, and then every so often they're going to go out and dump it out.
That is a bit confusing. So what causes, if the last animal, the one right at the bottom, is the most purposeful one, is the main one,
right?
what makes one the top versus the bottom? Is it in decreasing order of purpose?
Again, it goes right down to responsibility again. They track it with responsibility. So if you're not going to blast anything until you've done the consume on it, that means you feel more responsible to do the consume. The blast is maybe the purpose, maybe what you eventually feel responsible to do, but just not yet.
I see. So you're continuously working towards blast. But in which case, someone who's so someone who has consumed that as their main purpose to learn, they'll start with blasting and then playing and sleeping.
Right. Yeah.
Right. It's interesting. Why does it? I don't understand why it has to be that way. Is that simply that that Dave and Shannon, through observing 3,000 people, managed to track in each case a clear linear movement forwards?
Right. So I don't think it's linear. From what I've seen, I don't think it's linear, and I don't think it's accurate to everybody. But I think for the most part, the stacking makes sense. I think we can all do all the animals at all times, and we'll do different processes will require a different combination of them in a different order. But overall, with their tracking, it does make sense that overall I'm going to be doing more consume, and you're going to be doing more consume, and then blast will come after. Right. Which means in the end, you can probably trust that you've done the consume once you finally blasted.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That I can see why have a rationale be set up. It does seem to me I am a bit skeptical that you'd need to go through all these hoops to fulfill your purpose. And that one,
but like right now, what you're doing is playing on OP, and I see that you have no problem playing, even though you haven't done all of your consume on it yet. Like you haven't fully learned the system yet, but you're still coming out and playing in order to learn about it.
Yes. Now, I do like to sort of, poke at things to create situations where I can also learn more.
That's right. There you go. So that's going to be the play aspect as well.
Okay. That's interesting. I wonder why. I'm not sure exactly where sleep would come in for me.
Yeah, I don't know either. Sleep for you seems like it's either third or fourth. So it's for you, if your functions are correct, the way you've identified them, your sleep is going to be TI and SI. So it's going to be going over the facts.
I know that in objective personality, you should never type yourself. So I've never typed myself objective personality. All I can go from is the fact that Dave was confident enough in his typing of me to use me as a benchmark for the ENTP NETI type. That's why. So
good.
That's I can stand in that.
So then your sleep will be SI and TI.
So I think yes. No, that would make sense.
And then so whenever you're going to be going over your day, planning for tomorrow, looking at all of the information that you've gathered, using your TI to sort out the SI, it's going to be that. It's going to be going over the facts and the details and making sure that it all lines up, that all your ducks in a row.
No, I don't think I actually do that at all.
So then that's going to be really low.
Maybe that makes sense. I would have, I don't know, at least from information element definitions, I would probably said it's something more like the way I see TI and SI go together.
Yeah, it's an information element. They'll be going together and they'll be working together.
I don't see them as, one thing I would say is that I don't necessarily see information elements of the same vertness, introversion, extroversion, fitting together in quite the same way as those which are of different. For instance, NETI, I can see that blocking together in a perfectly metaphysical way, not just in terms of how people are actually behaving. So a theory, for instance, an organization of different ideas into a coherent set of principles, like socionics, like even aspects of OP, I would say is a good example of extrovert intuition, introverted thinking coming together. It's like the bricks, the concept would be like the bricks, the mortar holding it together would be that structure, that way of that set of rules and principles which hold it together. And it seems to me that that's almost fundamentally in the metaphysical level, fitting together as something which exists. And an alternative way, say SE and TI, I'd say that's where rules are instantiated in reality, where there are consequences for not following those rules. It could be punishments.
Why?
Well, because the idea that there's an enforcement of the structure of a rule onto reality in some way. This is a line drawn in the sand. This is a barrier you're not going to cross. This is
so you see SE as rules in society?
I see TI as rules, and then SE as the imposition of those rules onto reality.
So like rules that society makes or rules that reality makes?
Rules which the person makes. They create the truth is what they've asserted onto reality. That then becomes people's perceptions of truth. Is what you're talking about earlier. This idea that it isn't necessarily about facts. It's about,
So it sounds a little more SI what you're describing, because SE just is. SE just is reality. There's no. I don't put anything onto it. It puts things onto me. I can use the SE. I can manipulate it. I can push on it. But it's more factual than anything else.
So there's no imposition of will into what reality is, and making reality, what you forced it to be, how you've acted with your willpower to have you impacted on that reality.
Yeah, I guess there is that element in some way, but not what you were saying earlier. It sounds more like SI to me.
Interesting. Yeah. I found the way that socionics and MBTI are different. I think OP is closer to MBTI in that respect about sensation. So we'd say that when we take these structures, our imposition of the structures into reality is far more TI and SE together. We see it with figures like Trump, like Napoleon, like Vladimir Putin, even Joseph Stalin. There's the idea that
I just know that traditionally SE hates the systems. SE hates what society imposes on them. They're more of a rebel to those systems.
Yeah. No, I can see those are big differences. And so we often take those who are interested in power hierarchies, the idea of status and climbing to the top of a hierarchy. We would often type that as being more TISE. And we see in the translation across to MBTI, there was very little translation.
That's right. Yeah. The understanding of SE is really masculine SE, and it seems to also involve a little bit of masculine TE into the Socionics definition.
Now, this is why it wouldn't have occurred to me to type you as an LSI in the Socionic system, and why I'm also quite open to there being different typings across different systems.
Yeah, I just know that the actual cognitive functions that I am using are TI and NISE.
Yeah, that's fine. Also, we then end up disagreeing over what actual cognitive functions are because we have different viewpoints. And one thing I will say is I do see how I have certain similarities towards those sort of power hierarchy sorts of people in terms of how I'm using the thinking being about that internal consistency. Except for me, I'm not imposed.
I hate the power hierarchies. I detest them with a passion. And I see that really evident of TISE actually, and other ISTPs feel the same than me, and even ENFJs feel the same.
I would say that there is also two sides to this. Those in power are the ones who then impose their will and create what is true. They create their reality through the imposition of logic. But also those who are not included in those systems, who are excluded or marginalized by systems, they become a rebellious force against it. And they can overturn that system and create their own system. We see this in people like, for instance, Lenin, or you can see it in Che Guevara. And there could be that sort of...
But I think even the precursors to that would be Marx, for example, would be an exact example of being TISE, for example.
We would have typed him an IEI rather than LSI. But yes, the TI is blocked with SE in that type. The values have been there very much so. Yes. That's an interesting difference in the way we understand it. Meanwhile, we take TESI as being quite different as well. Instead of the imposition of a narrative onto reality, it's far more about the evidence base, what I've experienced to be working in the here and now, what seems to be what might disrupt how well things are working in that immediate moment.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, that's not me at all.
okay,
not even close.
No, exactly. That's what I'm wondering. Because, yeah, no, that's the thing. I'd always thought, at least in the socionic system, you'd be either an LII or an IEI. I'm not certain which. Not certain which. But I think definitely introverted logic across two systems makes sense for you.
Yeah.
But in terms of the LSE or even the SLI, this idea of self-sufficiency becomes a big thing. This idea of and self-sufficiency is being created by the blocking together of extroverted logic with introverted.
So I know in Model G, I'm an SLI.
Really?
Yeah, because Model G does something weird with extroverted thinking and introverted thinking. And there's like a minus and a plus there swapped around somehow.
That's reinvent. When you add new things onto the system, you need to I really believe that you need to make sure that it all integrates well, it makes sense, and doesn't lead to all sorts of things going whack at the very beginning. If you do that, it can completely throw people off. Maybe you are an SLI. I wouldn't trust it based on Model G. No,
I don't see myself as SLI at all. Anyway, yeah.
But I'd say purely due to the fact they've added the stuff in, they've changed the function definitions, and they don't seem to have really thought about how that actually, what implications arise from that. There can be differences there, and I wouldn't totally trust it as a result. I think it needs to be, I think it needs to be shown to be consistent with what either exists, or if it does replace something, it needs to be, needs to be shown to be better. It needs to make better sense of the existing phenomenon. It needs to be able to explain more in a more coherent way. Now, I'm trying to think what else we can talk about objective personality versus socionics. I'm trying to think of other stuff which I wrote down here. I think we covered quite a bit. Do you have any other points to make, maybe about socionics?
No, I wanted to talk about nomenclature a little bit, because that's something that sort of strikes me. In all the systems, it's good at least that each system has a different nomenclature. Like Eric Thor, for example, is using MBTI nomenclature, and it's just sort of like when he's talking about INFJ, for example, he's talking about something completely different than what anyone else is used to. Yes. So it's hard. So it doesn't. So like I get that there's a different nomenclature. I'm just wondering, maybe we can compare the nomenclature. And I realize it's a very superficial thing, but at the same time, it's also a very functional thing. So I don't know. There's a few points I have here. There's so like I could bring in the idea of chemistry having nomenclature. So like methanol, for example. So methanol is nomenclature for saying, okay, you're using a carbon with an oxygen and a hydrogen connected to it, right? Yes. And yes. You could do C2OH or something like that. So like this is an idea of nomenclature, how you label something, and then there's a fundamental structure that you can extract from that. So like MBTI, the nomenclature, you don't know what functions the person is using unless you've done a little bit of math, right? And same thing with Socionics, unless you know the system and what the words mean, you don't know. Like the L, if it's in the first one, you don't know if it means TI or TE until you've seen the last letter in Socionics.
Right. Oh, okay. Yes. In terms of type names. Yeah. No,
right. Exactly. Right. So there's that. But on the other hand, what you lose in functionality or in accuracy to what's actually going on, you gain in maybe efficiency. So I mean, like the highest efficiency would be in what's that system? The 1 to 9 Enneagram.
Oh, Enneagram.
Right? Yeah. So like that's high efficiency. They just have 1 to 9. We could have called the types 1 to 16 as well, right? Oh, 1, 5, right?
But
that doesn't represent anything going on under the surface. No. By the number 3, we don't know what 3 means until we've learned about it, right?
In the same way with socionics, in the MBTI and all of them, if you just give a name, like say the innovator, that's probably the highest efficiency, just a single name. You could give for each type 1 through to 16. You can give ILE 1, you can give SEI 2, and work your way through that way. We already understand that perhaps a more efficient way than ILE, which people actually do, some people do use the 2-letter form. So it's IL. Because they've given different names for say an LIE of PT. Yeah.
Yeah, but like then you're also confusing people by doing that, because they're going to have to hold a lot more in their head to figure out what the type actually means, or translate it out, right? And so in MBTI, at least the nomenclature, there's like an error correcting code there, right? So if someone says I'm an ITNJ, okay, you swap the T and the N around, you're an INTJ, right? So there's that. In Socionics, if you swap two around, you've changed the meaning. It's still legal.
Yeah.
So there's that aspect. Then there's the other aspect that, like in OP, for example, you can call someone also something that way. You can say I'm an NENI, right? And it makes no sense. That's not possible, right? So in Socionics you can do that too, but in MBTI you can't, because each one is a binary coin. It's set.
Yeah.
So there's that error correcting sort of aspect to it. And then there's the other thing where, like in Socionics, so in MBTI you can talk about EPs and IJs, right? But in Socionics, how do you talk about EPs? How do you talk about IJs? There's no nomenclature to relate that.
It's less. I think that is also the main difference. We don't actually start with the temperaments, with the EP or IJ. It's less important overall for us than the quadra values, than the information elements in their positions and what they are. So whereas you'd be looking at, for instance, first of all, are they an EP or are they an IJ? I'd be looking at, okay, what information elements are they using? Is there extrovert sensation there? Is there extrovert intuition there being valued instead?
So for me, it doesn't make sense that you would limit the way you can attack a person's personality type. If you're seeing right away there's an IP, whereas you're not seeing any information elements, we'll start there. It makes no sense to have a procedure of things you have to go through in order to get to someone's type.
I mean, you do have a procedure. There's the coins are your procedure.
But you can attack them from any angle.
Well, I'd say, but we can also attack from any angle. So instead, what we found from actually having these different concepts together and seeing how it works is that the temperaments actually carry less meaning to actually identify and type, and the things you're looking for working out these temperament, these say double decider, IP, EJ, etc. We've assigned in other areas. So when you talk about tribe versus self, right? I would say that is more to do with values than it is to do with strengths or with temperaments. Say one's energy, one's focus. I would say in general, the most tribey of the values would probably be those who have FE, SI, NE, and TI together. The most collective. And whereas we'd say that the gamma values, the NI, TE, FI, and SE, those would say are probably most independent, probably the most self-oriented. And the others are somewhere in the middle in different ways, and we can also describe those.
You think gamma is the most selfish?
In a way, yes. They can be the most about myself, my independence, and fending off people who can get in the way of my independence. It boils down to also this idea of harsh judgment in gammas. Alphas don't even do the judgment. They just want to have inclusive people getting along together and enjoying themselves. Betas are somewhere in the middle. They have more of a sense of exclusive belonging. I want to find there is an emphasis of tribe. It needs to be a special tribe. It's not just everyone coming together. There are rules to belong to this particular tribe, and I'm in the more special tribe.
Yeah, I don't see that as beta.
And then in delta, it's more, there is more that tribe-y element of extroverted thinking, which may say in that I just want things to work well. And as a result, I want to be the best that I can be and grow and develop in other ways. So I'm also open to, fostering relationships with lots of other people and learning whatever I can. Gamma be more about, no, I'm separate from other people. I'm an independent.
Yeah, I don't know if I've been seeing that with gammas either. I don't know if I've been seeing them as more selfish.
No. I mean, it will be, again, we're probably typing different people as these different types. There's no promise that we're typing people the same way. So, as you said before, I may have typed as an extroverted thinking, what you may not have typed as an extroverted thinking. That's the reason when you start with different nomenclature, these are very big differences. All I'm saying to make this point is that, the point I'm making is that the things you're using, we're not ruling out. We've just assigned it differently. In my personal opinion, I'd say because we haven't
felt the need to create 512 types, and we've managed to make sense of these different phenomena in different ways in socionics, I think ours is perhaps woven in perhaps a more elegant way, which makes sense because it's been more introverted.
That, again, that's you saying that socionics is more elegant because you have a horse in the race too, right?
Well, no, I mean, I could change my mind to OP.
Okay.
If you were able to account for things in a more elegant way, have greater explanatory power with less superfluousness, then I would see no reason why I wouldn't switch to OP. And then what I do is I make a big, statement to everyone. Everyone, look at me. I'm now.
I don't think it's necessary for you to switch to OP, but I do think it's necessary for you to update your understanding of socionics, and maybe mold and sculpt socionics into something that's more true to reality. And I think OP has to do the same thing. I don't think any system we can come up with is going to ever work one-to-one with reality, and everything has to grow and converge onto some single system.
I think something as I said, actually, I did as part of that is when I realized that this idea of conscious and unconscious doesn't really work very well if you think of the types. Most people can think about their what we call the demonstrative function quite well, and they're quite conscious of it. Yeah. It's not that it's a difference in consciousness. It's more of a question of what we call public and private. They're sorting this thing out for themselves rather than bringing it to the external world in some way.
Well, I have no problem using TE on a local basis. Honestly, I feel dirty when I use it. It feels wrong, but I'll still do it.
I find, I don't know about dirty. I know where I feel dirty. I know what makes me feel dirty. Right. I feel dirty when I'm using extroverted sensation.
Yeah.
And I know this. When I'm having to take charge in where it involves pushing people out, I feel a bit dirty.
So that in OP is blast. It's not extroverted sensation. That's blast.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. For me, it's okay. Interesting. That. I mean, other parts of blast.
That would mean INTJs or ENTJs are also pushing on people in the same way because it's their blast.
And so we wouldn't. If someone were an ILI and they were being quite commanding and actually dominating the environment, I'd say that's probably too much extroverted sensation for us to qualify them as an ILI in the socionic system. We'd say they're perhaps an LIE, perhaps maybe an ESI or an SEE. But yeah.
From what I've noticed, like ESTPs, for example, they're not pushing other people to do things. They're just doing their own thing. They're just pushing themselves. They're not trying to control people.
I mean, but if we take like Donald Trump as example, he is. He definitely wants to be the boss, wants to be the one in power, and he definitely pushes and makes people do things around him the way he wants. He's not just out there doing his own thing. I do see it, although what I will say is that it's a bit, for me to say that's what SE is all about is a bit crude. Yeah. It isn't about that, because SE, when it isn't with TI, it's with FI, it is more independence minded. It's more about defending one's independence, about not letting anyone be the boss of you, rather than having to be the boss of others and set out structures for others to follow. And that's so right. We creature
and EPs in general will be like that as well. Will be more on the don't control me, bro axis.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So we find that we end up, in terms of a correlation between Socionics and Myers-Briggs, we find that SEEs are more likely to get, say, an ESTP, sometimes ESFP, whereas SLEs actually don't get ESTP very often, and may more likely get ENTJ, because when you put the TI in there, it becomes a bit more.
This is something that OP brings. There's a superposition going on here, right? There's two things adding up to be a third thing, right? And what OP brings is it separates those two things. You type them separately, and then afterwards you see that third thing. Does it add up? Yeah, so we're right. It's a sort of cross check. So if you're seeing that the person is going to be some kind of IJ, you're seeing that they're using their tribe function second, and you're seeing that they're blast first, and then you're seeing that they're actually pushing on other people. They're like, okay, those two things together add up to pushing, add up to controlling the tribe.
So now the inductive reasoning. Or was it deductive reasoning?
It's decoupling things. It's decoupling and then recoupling. And I think that like a lot of systems in society need that as well. To like, there's all kinds of things all tied and tangled up into things where if you separate them out, decouple them, you can see how they add together to create that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that's okay. So this idea of a series of coins, a series of moving from one position to the next based on what you found. Is it this or that? Okay, then, if then this, etc. We like to use that in sociology. You don't have to use in sociologics. The thing about sociology is because there's so many different schools, there are many different methodologies. Some of them are absolutely crap. Like, I'm not going to defend those ones. I'm critical of those. Others I think are better, and then certainly ones in the future will be even better than that. Things we can learn from more scientific approaches. What I would say is that one way I like to use is a bit like a series of coins. The difference is we start with quadras and then move towards temperament and strength within quadra, rather than starting
I think quadra needs to be used in OP as a cross-check. Probably a lot of the, I don't like to call them mistypings, but at least the ones I've been seeing could have just been solved by looking at the quadra. But what they do is, because there are coins, you can cross-check. You can see this person seems to be using NE. Are they also using SI? Like, do they have the other side? Is okay, the NE seems to be their dominant function. Do they have problems in the SI? If that, then we've seen both sides of the coin and we can be confident that this is what they're using.
Oh yeah, certainly. Well, that's basically what I'd be doing. I mean,
right, and the same thing goes for masculine and feminine. If you see their NE is masculine, do we see the SI is feminine? Now we're confident. Now we can say.
I think that's a good approach. I mean, what we do so sometimes is, if someone is, for instance, Boris Johnson, right, Prime Minister, United Kingdom, we can see he makes some far more sense as an ENTP rather than say an ISFJ or an ESFJ or one of those others, because we can see the expert intuition. But we can also see a deficit of introverted sensation. This is someone who is often quite unkempt. His tie can be askew, his hair can be wherever. He seems to have a certain chaoticness in terms of managing sort of the day-to-day stuff. But in terms of the big ideas which he comes up with, he's readily coming up with those. So we do those checks.
So yeah, from what I've seen, any dominants are more ordered and structurally than I am in their sensory surroundings. Their houses are going to be more tidy. Their haircuts are going to be nicer. They're going to be more kempt overall, especially if they started using that SI a little more. So like you're wearing this nice suit with this great thing here, and you got your hair all cut, and your surroundings look all nice and organized and clean. Like, what's that?
This is nothing to do with me.
Yeah. But I mean, generally, if you have SI somewhere in your top 4, you're going to be doing it a lot better than an SE.
I don't know. I'd say this. My jacket, I like it because it's blue, but I like the boutonniere because I realized I come up with pocket squares, and it occurred to me that I heard that from the Gentleman's Gazette. That's a good thing to do. And I saw they also did boutonnieres, and I thought to myself, what's this buttonhole for? Put something in it. Why not? And I feel it now feels like it's sort of incomplete without having something in it. But so that could be some SI. But what says my haircut? I only get my haircut when my fiance tells me to.
Yeah.
I wouldn't actually look after my haircut very well at all. Otherwise, I'd completely forget to do it. And my room is a complete tip.
Is it? Okay.
Complete tip. I only clean up when.
I don't know if I trust you on that, because I've seen some ENFPs say how messy their surroundings are, and then I go and I look, and it looks cleaner than ever. Yeah, let's go.
Let's go from subjectivity into objectivity.
There we go.
Right now, and I'll show you my room. Okay, this is going to be my room, and it's okay. It's not as tippy as it could be because my fiance has been staying with me, and she's been reminding me when it gets too tippy. We also have a cleaner in there who works for the family, so she also makes it less tippy. But nonetheless, this is,
yeah, it looks like a little bit of clutter. Yeah,
I mean, I can't walk.
Yeah,
without actually treading on a watering can.
Yeah. And I can see how that would stress you out and would be pretty bad, but I'm really afraid to show you my surroundings because I'm much worse.
It stresses out Zara a lot more than me, but it does also get to me. I'm not saying I don't do it because it does, but I'm not usually the one focusing on it. And most of the time, when I'm thinking about different ideas and possibilities, when I'm working on, say, something interesting in Socionics, I completely forget about that stuff.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, it's like, oh, I'm then reminded about it later. I can go out and have a conversation with people about something very interesting to me, and I won't realize until later that it's bloody freezing. My body sort of reminds me eventually, because I just start, my teeth start chattering, and I realize, hang on a second, I can't talk properly because my teeth are chattering. Why is that? Oh, I'm cold. And so, yeah, it is in a valued position. When this mess accumulates, it definitely gets me down more. It makes me feel a bit more frustrated.
Right.
But it's not something which I'm immediately one paying attention to.
Yeah.
It's Zara who usually quickly and immediately knows these things can't be here. This needs to be like this. These need to go back here. This needs to be cleaner, clearer, more convenient to move across, more relaxing, more comfortable. So, yeah, I don't know what was the point we were making about this. I can't remember about your more mess.
The point is still your mess is relatively clean compared to what an SE user would be. Like, just put it that way. The I've seen NI people with actually quite neat surroundings because the SE will distract them. They're organizing it for different reasons.
Yeah.
The SE will take them out. It will not let them see anything else. It'll annoy them completely.
I think that I know with, say, NI and SE users, there is none of that desire to actually bring things into sort of a what's the word, an aesthetically pleasing whole around them.
Right. And then also there's the idea that there's no meaning to anything. None of our objects, none of our belongings have any meaning to us. So it's trivial to just keep things in some sort of order and some sort of... It's trivial, that's right.
Yes. Yeah. And that makes a complete sense of socionics. I know that Karl Marx, he lived in squalor, didn't care about it. Yeah. For me, I don't like squalor, but squalor can accumulate around me until I'm reminded. Yeah. And yes, I agree with you on that point. I think that a lot of more, when you get to types, when I've noticed types, say, ESIs and LSIs and socionics, though, their introvert sensation is what we call a demonstrative function. And we find them actually being quite neat.
Yeah, I've seen that with an ESFP, a couple of ESFPs who actually are quite good at organizing and keeping the place neat, and they put it up. They take responsibility for it too. Yeah, for sure. Yes, and I think that's because introvert sensation is also in some sort of position for senses, even if they don't necessarily value it, they may end up doing it nonetheless. Whereas, if I think of, say, an IEI in socionics, especially one who's perhaps more masculine, doesn't have, friends they think may care about that sort of thing, they can live in a total pigsty and they won't necessarily care. It's all trivial. It's not important. Sort of the Rasputin sort of level of cleanliness. Yeah, well, I think I'm in the same position, right? There's not much of a difference between them and me. It's similar. Yeah. Okay. They're just using FI instead of TI.
My brother also, to a degree, also does not. He never cleans anything. He's not interested. It's just trivial to him, unimportant. The only thing that's important to him is the film career he wants to work towards and to be in the film industry. That's the only thing that's important. He'll narrow all other possibilities out.
Right. Well, yeah, because also the FI is the prioritizer. They're just always prioritizing priorities. That's what FI does.
FI?
Yeah. FI is constantly looking at their priorities and prioritizing, reprioritizing, seeing, So it makes sense that he would have that kind of thing.
Oh no, for him it's not. No, he'd be more introvert, intuition oriented.
Introvert, okay.
I think so. In terms of personal attachments, it's less of a thing for him.
Right.
It's not about. It's about he must be in the film industry. That's the outcome, which
that's the goal then. Okay.
Nothing
so
else important.
Right. It's not a priority per se then.
Whereas I've taken my sister, who I think would make sense in an introverted feeling type. It's all for her about how she's reacting to things around her. Oh, that feels good. No, that feels wrong and bad to me. And she'll react in that sense. And for her, it's very important. She forms a close and intimate relationships with specific people. And she's very particular about who those are because she chimes well with them over others. And she'll create distance with people she can't trust so well. Or she'll try to create distance. And sometimes she'll end up doubting and giving people the benefit of doubt, and it hurts her more, and then she gets upset again. And as I see introverted feeling,
it's really hard to get what introverted feeling is from them because they're not very clear on what it is. Usually, they're not very able to put it into words. Usually, as well.
I've been fortunate that, well, at least from a socionics perspective, I've been fortunate that I've met people, I've got to know people who are good at describing introverted feeling to me, and saying that there's more my vulnerable function, so it's still quite strange to me. The idea of it is being the sense of I know who I am, I know what my character is, and I want to find people of a like character of another.
So from what I've seen, it's similar. It's prioritizing. So it's not who I am, but I know what's important to me, and I know what's most important to me, and I know what's less important to me. I know what my priorities are, what I would give up, what is critical, and what I can give up on.
What do you mean by importance?
So like it goes back to values as well, right? You have to go back to Jung. So it's all about what's important to their own character, what they're willing to,
Okay, so it sort of chimes with my character. It's
right, but like also it has to do with just like an FI user could know which band is their favorite band. This is my priority. Or music is my priority. Even though I'm going to make no money off of it, I'm just going to do music because that's what's most important to me. And it's all about building those priorities in a structure in order to, I don't know, to build their identity in that way, because their identity is that structure of priorities.
Okay. It's interesting. Again, it's that sort of structure, because I can think of TI as also being about prioritizing.
I don't know. I don't think TI for me is prioritizing per se. It's about figuring out where there are contradictions and resolving those contradictions.
No. Yes, I agree in that aspect, but also in then actually creating the systems and actually creating how that then actually fits together, and creating systems which are more consistent. There's the idea that some things come first, some things come after that.
Only because that's how they contradict less. Not because one is more important than the other. It's because this is,
Okay, yes, but I think when it comes to importance, I think it depends on what one means by importance. If it's important in terms of significance, this feels like it has a greater significance. It could be going more places. I feel it's more of an intuitive way of calling something important. Whereas important in terms of this will create more good. I think that is perhaps more in terms of extroverted thinking, introverted feeling territory.
Yeah, I just know that they're all day prioritizing. That's what FI does. They're prioritizing priorities. That's just what they're doing.
I do find that prioritizing does sound a little bit more formalized.
It does. It does, because they would never use that language.
No, I wouldn't. And in the way I'd say, rather than, I say it more as sort of sentimental attitude forming, value judgments.
Yeah, you got to be careful if that's coupled though, because if it's coupled with SI, that would make more sense. When it's coupled with NI, it's a bit different, but similar as well. Yeah.
I know I wouldn't actually couple it. When I talked about blocking before, the way I'd see FI is working best when blocked is with SC and NE. And when I mean that, I mean two main forms of judgment: good faith judgment or harsh judgment. The judgment where you are forming an assessment of character based on different possibilities and speculations. What could their motivations and intentions be, and how do I feel about that? Yeah. And the idea is that then there's good faith. Like if I see something which is wrong, I'm then trying to understand why it might be that way, why I might be wrong in my immediate, in the initial response. Whereas SC and FI is more, they did wrong, they're a bad person, get away from them, create distance, impose my will to create a barrier between me and that bad person, the person who I've judged, who I feel a negative attitude towards.
And yeah, I don't know if that's what SCFI does. That sounds a lot like tertiary FI, maybe even.
Okay, that. I would say, okay, no, that's fine. I would say that when it's in the tertiary and socionics, mobilizing, it becomes less nuanced. But I'd say in the stronger position, there may be more of a sense of sizing up, getting an estimation of you based on your actions, and maybe a bit less defensive as a result. Like, who are you? What are you about? How can we work together? And that very quick assessment. It still has a very harsh judgment to it, but it's less sort of, you did wrong, I now need to protect myself from you. It's in a bit perhaps a stronger, more prepared position.
Yeah, could be. I don't know. Could be.
Yep. Okay, that's fine. I think we'd see the sort of firmer, sort of keep away from me approach, perhaps with a more inert use for the ESI and also ILI in the tertiary, but also perhaps in the leading. Whereas in the sort of the creative, the second position, say with ESFPs, well, the socionics version of ESFPs, it'll be a bit more flexible and more sort of how can we work together approach. Again, that sort of estimation. But yeah, how would you, what would you say for, given that you said that does work in tertiary, what is different when it's not in tertiary? What is different when it's higher up that makes it less about that?
I find that tertiary it doesn't have it won't have the balance with so like it won't have the balance with FE. The FI won't have the FE check to it. So
also because when you say doesn't have the balance of FE, you mean for say an ISFP the balance of FE? What do you mean?
Like tertiary would be ISTJ or INTJ.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So double deciding.
Double deciding as well, but also when they do go into the FI, it'll be more of it'll be less nuanced, like you said. It'll be more this or that. This person is good or bad, or I hate him or I like him, or like more stuff like that. Yeah. But at the same time, there is more of a like a depth to a tertiary function. I find that like it's because it's such a struggle. It's also there's also such a beautiful structure to it. I think this is something I've seen with all tertiary, that there's like this it's like melancholic almost the way it comes off, where it's like it's not like an inferior. It's not just like completely brushed away, but it's there to the degree that it's fragile. And
yes, that's why we say it's weak, but it's also bold, but it's also inert or stubborn, and that peculiar mix we find specifically for the mobilizing function, where it's a struggled point of pride, sometimes of overconfidence that is quickly shattered and can then lead to retreat. And it's peculiar aspects. We do see that in people attempting it. For me, it's when I make an attempt to appeal to other people, to impress other people, to create positive reactions to other people, and end up looking like a complete buffoon, or I say something which actually makes people think I'm really actually quite nasty, or make me think that I'm actually, it leads to a negative response in people, and then I will then retreat and go back to why I find more TE. And when I said before about the demonstrated function not being so disgusting, it doesn't really disgust me. It's just not interesting. It's low stakes and low reward for me. I'm not averse to the idea of taking in, of sort of making improvements, seeing solutions, making things work better. That's not disgusting to me.
Oh no, that's going to be more of a NETI thing for you. It'll be less of a TE thing.
But I can also see,
So let's say one of your friends' computer isn't working.
Yes.
And they ask you, "Okay, can you come fix my computer?" sort of thing. It would, like, you can do it. Yeah, there you go. That facial expression right there shows it. It's that you can do it. It's just like not what you should be doing with your life. Like it's not what you should be doing with your thinking. Your thinking is meant for other things. Yeah,
that's my point. But it's something I can do. I can quickly learn how to do it.
Right.
Make it work better. Right.
But you don't feel responsible to it, and it makes you feel like your TI is becoming impure in a way. Like I'm using it for an impure purpose. It should be used for something. It should be TI, not TE.
I think logic in general, rather than necessarily TI, is logic being used in a way which is not the way I'd like, which is more of a TI approach. I'd say it's more of a TE. I don't see how it would be TI. It's not about internal structure. It's about finding information and using it in a more productive way to make something work better. And that's not really giving me clarity. It's more improving how something works. And I can do it. I can do it very well.
Yeah.
I'd say that's TE.
Yeah. Like changing your oil or something like that.
Sorry?
Like changing your oil in your car or something like that. Like doing maintenance,
If to be fair, if I'm changing oil in the car, I like doing that a bit because it's sort of something which I'm still, I can recently learn how to drive. So I'm going to show you, I can do it all now. I can drive.
Okay.
Great. But no, going away and learning something, the purpose of applying it and making something work better for someone is, I do it. I'm usually very willing to do it as well. But I'm also like, it's a bit boring.
Yeah.
And what I find most energizing is when I'm coming up with ideas and I'm talking about them for other people. So the clarity of understanding in my head, I'm then sharing with others and creating positive reactions in other people.
Right. So we can talk about NI in that context, right? So you enjoy coming up with ideas, but then when it comes down to actually narrowing down and picking one and going deep on an idea, that's where it'll feel like that's not what you should be doing. Like
I don't mind going deep. Going deep's fine. For me, it's when it becomes limiting. It's when it's this thing is something I'm committed to now, and I can't.
You're losing your audience, by the way. We've been going for almost 3 hours.
I know. How do you feel like we should finish?
I don't know. I don't want to force everybody to watch this. You're going to put it on YouTube, and then everyone's going to be like, "Oh God, no one's going to even click." They'll see the time. They'll be like, 3 hours. I'm not going to even start.
Slowly but surely mutating into Ben Vaseland.
Yeah, exactly. You are now Ben Vaseland.
Conversations. Goodness, you're right. Maybe we should finish. One point.
Also, you never delivered the fight that you promised everyone.
Well, I don't actually like fights. That's the thing.
Yeah, all right.
I like discussions more than fights. But the point I was making back then about, there's a tenuous connection between extroverted thinking and tribe, more so than FE and tribe. Maybe we should change the definition of the nomenclature of tribe to something else. So it's less necessarily about people, more about the external. I think that might make more sense. It just seems to me to be very tenuous to have that right at the founding post in the series of coins for working out type. And I think that's...
So from what I've seen, the way, like, maybe you can talk to a little bit more about TE dominant people that they've typed in OP and see how you see them through, you might put them all as SE, because it sounds like the way that SE and Socionics works is a combination of SE and TE.
SE and Socionics, we would it's about that primal will to have impact on the real world and be more of a dominant force, have that impact.
Yeah.
So it's too primal for TE. It's not really something we think something through. And that's sort of one of the differences I found, that with Socionics, we really started by looking at the information elements and looking at what made sense. And then we try to apply it to reality. Does it
so
actually?
Personally, I think SE is misdefined in Socionics. You're cutting out a lot of SE users in the way that you define SE. And you're maybe even including TE users rather than only SE users.
Okay. But would you say that just because you've typed those people as SE types and missing them out? Or is there something about your definition or how you've come to make sense of SE, which would suggest we're actually missing something out of our definition?
So like how I've made sense of SE is just that it's people who are accountable to the here and now and in reality, people who put that as their quote unquote God.
Right. That's the thing. And we would often have put that with SI. We would put it somewhere else. We wouldn't have just cut them out of the picture and marginalized them. We just would have typed them differently. So the thing about SI, by making it so much about organization and certainty, I could just as well say you're cutting people out of SI by doing that. Really, what we're doing is just assigning people into different boxes based on slightly different criteria. And all I'd say is that the criteria we put together, Socionics seem to have put a bit more thought into that from the get-go. Whereas into OP, they sort of start off with a bit more vague definitions in places, and they've really worked on some sort of methodology for typing. And now they may be going back and changing that, which is fine. But
OP is struggling mostly less with the definitions and how you catch people. And if you figure out this is how we catch SE DOMs, we're going to catch a whole bunch of them. And we're going to now ask them all questions and say, hey, what is SE for you? Now we'll start to form what a definition of is SE. Whereas if you start with a definition and then you go out and you start trying to catch people using that definition, you're going to have a harder time because you don't actually know how to catch them. And then at the same time, you're going to impose your definition of SE onto them. And, oh, it doesn't match you, so then you're not SE.
But you've also got a self-fulfilling prophecy that if you start with a definition and you catch people who accord to that definition, and then you ask them what it is, it's going to match what you already set out on.
That's right. So that's the problem with Socionics.
That's also the problem with OP.
No, it's not, because OP doesn't start with a definition. It starts with a way to catch them.
Well, how do you catch something which you haven't defined?
You define how to catch, not define what it is. You define how you see how it's expressed rather than what it is.
But that's the point. With Socionics, we came with definition by seeing how things were expressed, clear themes in reality. Say, for instance, the archetypes, right? If we trust in you and we can see certain archetypes which show, say, the warrior. What is the warrior or the conqueror? This is a very clear thing, a very clear phenomenon. What is that? What is conquering? What is that about? Is it about a desire to organize our reality? Or is it a desire to be the very best and the more primal thing?
Again, archetypes are a shortcut. I wouldn't ever use an archetype as a way to define a function. It's a shortcut on how to understand functions. So if you're new to type and you want to learn about it through archetypes, that's great. But I wouldn't go into the BB model and be like, this is the end all for how.
No, I'm not saying BB. I'm not saying the way that BB shoehorns archetypes into the functions. No, what I'm saying is that there are these clear roles, these salient roles, which different people are playing in society in some way, in the world around us. And they make sense. We see when he's pointing to those characters saying, hang on, that's that kind of person. Why are we pointing to those people in that sort of way? There's some sort of truth in terms of how that's lined up, in which people commonly recognize. But we have to think, okay, what's going on there? What is a way of making sense of that archetype? Why is it that?
The thing is, any type can be a warrior. Your type can be a warrior. Any type could be a warrior. Anyone can do anything.
I can join the military, sure. But what actually is the understood ideal of what it means to be a warrior?
If you went and you jumped into the warrior culture, right? You're not built to be a warrior. But say you went there and you wanted to figure it out and you block banged, you NETI'd being a warrior, you might have an advantage over everyone else because they're used to some other type of warrior.
Sure, I know, but we're not talking about a specific individual and how much they can bend and flex. We're talking about the motivations themselves. What is it about it? What is it about being a warrior, being a conqueror? What does that mean? And you have to drill down to what exactly does that has made that up? What are the motivations? What are the approaches to the world?
To draw warrior to type, to draw the connection there, that's fine once you figured out type and be like, okay, well, these types tend to be fit this archetype. Okay. But I would never use that to type someone, and I would never use that to figure out what type is. That's just going about it backwards.
No. You don't just compare people up to archetypes, but the archetypes, they'll show you what are the things of salience, what are the things to look at, what are the things to try to then understand.
Yeah.
And then building some sort of typology. Because otherwise you could start anywhere. Dave and Shannon started somewhere, didn't they? They started with Jung, they started with this. Why did they start with it? Because there's something salient. So the difference here is that they started with something salient. They said that no, actually we're not. We're going to start off with some sort of process for catching something which we don't know what. And then they catch things, which curiously happen to align very much to Jungian type.
Well, and then but Jung also was doing the same thing, right? Jung was analyzing patients for, I think, 11 years, something like that. He was analyzing patient after patient after patient, and he started organizing them into groups, saying, okay, these types seem to have this dominant function, and at the exclusion of this one, and theorizing in that way. And so when he presents his findings, now we can be like, okay, how are we going to catch those people? How are we going to? So he saw them, they exist. How do we catch them? And that's the precursor to defining type is finding people who are those types. And then once you've found them, then you can actually ask them and dive deeper in and get your definitions from that. Whereas if you start off with a definition, you might be missing people.
But you still won't know if you found them until you have some sort of idea of what you're looking for.
Yeah.
You're not going to. So there was an idea of what we're looking for, and so when in socionics, exactly the same in that respect. We have an idea.
The socionic definition of SE is different from Jung's.
Yeah. Well, yes, that is true. There is a difference there. Jung may have given it some thought, and we've also given it more thought. The main thing is when we're looking at sensation, what is sensation about?
Well, okay. I would think if you wanted to actually compare systems and actually catch proper people, right? And if you really wanted to learn what SE is, we have a problem with SE. We see that between the two systems. So let's find people who are inferior NI or NI dominant. And then we'll learn from them what SE is. And then after we've done that, we can say, okay, definitively, Socionics is right about SE because this is what the inferior NI SE looks like.
Okay,
or we can say definitively OP is right.
But you know how that will work. Like you'll present people you think are inferior NI. I'll present people I think are inferior NI.
And we have the same definition of NI, don't we?
I'm not sure we do.
Well, if we found a similar definition of NI, then there's no problem finding people with SE.
Well, for instance, I can see how NI and SE go together naturally. It makes sense that if you have someone who has that sort of limiting, but also long-term vision of where things should go, right? It makes sense that what backs that up is that sort of drive, that impact and energy to make that a reality.
Sure.
The warrior and the shaman.
Yeah, but it doesn't need to be in that way to make it a reality. Making something a reality doesn't need to be in a warrior's way. It can be in many other ways.
It can be, but we can see it in lots of other different ways. Any way where there's some sort of taking decisive action onto our reality in an impactful way. And it
can be someone
sorry, the connection
who passively are passive.
Hang on, it's gone a bit funny again. Hang on. I think slightly it's a bit freezy on your end. Okay, it's a bit better now. Hello? I can see you. Just about. Depends on Binyamin's side. I really should go to the loo again. Shall I wait until he's back, or shall I go
back
now? Oh, we're back. Okay. Binyamin.
Yeah.
So one thing I would say is, at least how we will approach that extrovert sensation, is that we put a lot of thought into what makes information, how does it end up being broken up? And let's say we've already gotten to sensation, and we defined it as information which is somewhat external, and that it's somewhat concrete, somewhat real. I think that's something we both agree on.
Yeah, physical.
Yeah, physical, real. Okay. And let's say when determining the differences between these two main ways of approaching the real, the concrete, what would those two different approaches be?
Right. And so just right back to Jung, it's subjective versus objective. It's personal versus impersonal.
It doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, just because
Well,
Jung described it that way, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be that way. Jung could be trying to work it out, but doesn't necessarily mean it fits perfectly. Well,
what do you define extroverted and introverted as then?
Well, I would say it's more about the increasing of breadth versus a refining of depth.
Also,
breadth and depth.
Yeah.
And that can overlap a great deal.
It overlaps with a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah, it does. But what I'd say in that is that the approach towards reality is, are you either trying to accumulate more and more territory, more and more influence and impact on your environment?
So that, again, is not information. That's an action. That's a decision.
I mean, it does show in decisions.
Yeah.
But also the idea that there's actually, potential threats, pressures. Other people have more impact than you, more force than you, more power than you, more.
Yeah. So I don't think it has to have anything to do with power or force. It can. It just doesn't have to be.
So what? Okay. But I'm saying, let me just set out the differences from the way we would see it. So that extroverted approach, let's say, of accumulating more and more physical, concrete things, suggests maybe a bit more possessive, taking more, having more control over more, having more grasp over more.
Again, that's one way it can express itself. It doesn't have to.
Let me also show what we say as the opposite. With introvert sensation, the idea of not accumulating more and more, but actually refining the quality of sensation, more about appreciating things more for what they are, more about having the more refined, more aesthetic, more convenient or harmoniously flowing sensory experiences. And the idea of, I find that perfectly satisfying experience where you're not trying to take on more and more and more stuff. You're not battling for more materialistic satisfactions. Instead, it's more about just enjoying that moment and enjoying it in the way which you best can.
So again, enjoying the moment, it could go with both. It could go with SE or SI. Yeah. But finding meaning in the physical reality around you is more the SI. Finding the meaning there, stacking on layers of the meaning.
But what is, there's the thing about meaning. Like, what do you say is meaning?
So the idea of like, let's take any object, like keys, for example. So keys can have many symbols to them, many meaning to them. Keys is unlocking a door, unlocking an idea, all of these things stack onto the physical object of key. It provides meaning. It adds to what a key is. And this is the kind of thing that SI is looking at. It's looking at the meaning behind the objects, the depth to the object.
But that's abstracted, isn't it?
It's abstracted, but it's in an SI way.
But abstract is the opposite of concrete. It surely, if we've agreed that
for them it's concrete. For them it's concrete.
No, but you can't say for them it's concrete. That doesn't mean anything. For them it's concrete. For them sky can be green. When we're talking about, if we've agreed that sensation is something which is concrete, which is physical, we can't then start trying to say it's abstracted. We can't start offering abstract. That must be something else.
It's subjective. Yeah, it's really subjective to them. Like, let's say they have a ring that used to belong to their grandmother, that belonged to their great-grandmother. This ring is going to have a lot of meaning to it, and they're going to stack meaning onto it, and they're going to want it to keep having meaning. They're going to want other people to see it with meaning.
But what is this meaning? Well, could you tell me what meaning is in a way which is not at all anything other than concrete? That's what I need. I need to have that to know that you've got a definition of introvert sensation which is consistent to sensation in general.
So, So like we could put meaning into living a life of meaning, for example, which is different from meaning in physical objects.
Okay. And
right.
What would that be?
Living a life of meaning, you might say it's living a life where you've created something special in the world, I guess, and now you have a meaning on the history stage.
What makes it special?
Well, I don't know. You're asking me for any example here. I'm not using any.
I'm not trying to be facetious. I'm just trying to get this idea of meaning and see how it manifests in a concrete way. Now, I could offer something which is a bit different, but perhaps is similar enough.
Okay.
And I think harmony. And what I mean by harmony, I mean the physical reality coming together in an elegant way, where the quality is refined, so much as harmonious. Nothing clashes. Nothing is unpleasant. Nothing is ugly. Nothing is unaligned.
So I've seen SI users really like horror genres, and they like, skulls, like skulls of people or things like that. Like this is also can be SI. As long as the skull has a deep meaning, they can put it on their shelf. And even though it's
I think if you're harking back to something more abstracted, something deeper, I'd say that's introversion intuition. You're going into the abstract. You're actually moving away from the present. Personally, I would say what I said as SI is something which I can relate to quite a bit. What you're talking about now, I'd say that idea of something more Gothic, something which has a sense of a Gothic or something of a sense of more profound. I think that's going into introversion intuition territory.
I don't think so. Especially not. Maybe you can do a little research on that. Talk to people who you've typed as SI. I asked them about it.
I have already. That's the thing.
This definition actually started with Jamie, and I've checked it with other people who were other people who are SI DOMs, and they've all confirmed it with exclamation marks. Even they were really excited about this definition because it really captures what SI is for them.
That she would try to create manifestations of the Gothic in her.
No, not that specifically, but finding meaning in the physical world. Yeah.
Okay, but also I do know people with introversion station do use the word meaning. People do use it quite a lot. They often mean very different things when they say meaning.
Natalia is a little bit infuriated with me. She says, I keep throwing statements out there and then backs away. How would I know that? It's infuriating. Okay.
I don't know. Look, at the end of the day, our debates are for people to watch and make up their own minds.
Right.
And that's fair enough. What I would say is, when I find people with introversion do talk about meaning, and when they say meaning, they say it just feels right. It feels like it just flows. And they feel it in sort of almost a physical way of it just flowing. There's no disruption. There's no harsh edges where something feels forced. It's just flowing up in a natural and organic feeling. And they describe that as meaningful. It's not the same sort of thing. It's a very different thing to what you just said about.
Well, I think no matter what, the introverted functions are going to have more meaning ascribed to them. They're going to be more personal, and they're going to have meaning. This is more meaning in the physical world. This is meaning in sensory.
I would say rather than assuming, I would say perhaps more of I use the word integrated rather than introvert personally. I think that's the idea of it needs to sort of connect up in the right sort of way. It needs to align in the right sort of way.
Sure, call it whatever you want.
That's it. But if we're talking about meaning, I think for introversion sensation does need to make sense in that more concrete way. We need to concretize that. Otherwise, we can lead to all sorts of little mistakes. Doesn't look like a mistake now, but it goes towards a type level. It can lead to huge differences, and we won't even realize we've done that. We feel being entirely objective, but just because we haven't been as disciplined as we can be, as pernickety as we can be about these little definitions at this earlier stage in defining information elements. And I think that might be where OP may run into problems. Socionics could also run.
I think that's where Socionics runs into problems as well. That's it's not only my problem with Socionics, it's a lot of people have a problem with the definition of SE and how it differs from what Young was seeing.
Oh yeah, but just differing from what Young was seeing is not in itself a problem.
No, it's not in itself a problem. You're right. I agree, 100%.
As I say, the originator of an idea is really the expert in the idea.
Yeah.
Because expertise is accumulated understanding over
it doesn't. It at least gives him a seat at the table, and at least gives him an important.
I agree. It does give him a seat at the table. Absolutely. But we also, as Kat is saying, Asher wasn't trying just to match everything to Jung. Jung gave the first signpost there's something there, and then we can go and see, okay, we need to pay him his due. Right. We don't have to agree with him either. So
no, we don't. You're right.
So the question is, what is the rationale that says that what we've done must be wrong or is likely wrong?
So the rationale is basically that I see SE users that aren't interested in that impact. They aren't interested in dominating and in the power hierarchy and things like that. And they're still very clearly SE users and SE dominant users, especially when you look at feminine SE.
I do agree with the power hierarchy side. And I'd say that's because the hierarchical aspect is where you see TI being oriented. But also, what power hierarchies are we talking about? Are we talking about the conventional ones? Because it depends on which hierarchy you see as the one which you're in. And it's a question of actually finding how that manifests. I don't want to speak overly generalistically about the types, but rather I'd say it's about how they see, say, statements being made, how truth is being organized in terms of assertions, and how they tend to see things in terms of their status relative to others. What exactly the rules are of those status might be can vary from person to person. And that's even then, it's only with the SLEs and the LSIs. If you go towards the SCEs, it's not going to be nearly as structured. It's going to be more about my power relative to someone else in terms of a relationship. In terms of, I tend to call the shots more relationship. I'd be the more dominant one relationship. I tend to have greater esteem in others, and that can give me my power.
I think just SE in general has a lot of power over SI in a way, just because it doesn't take the physical world as seriously. It doesn't take the physical world as personally. So they have less of a problem, I don't know, just making a mess, causing chaos in the sensory world, because SI is going to be less. But I don't think that's their primary motivator. I just think it's something that is. We stop here.
And taking more territory in that battle and the clash of wills, which I think is a very primal thing. It's very hard. It'd be very difficult to rule out this battle and clash of wills motivation, not a thing. But that does exist in an antithesis.
Right. So I think that's an expression. I think it's an expression that SE can take, but I don't think it's fundamental to all SE.
I think, I don't know, it just seems so fundamental to almost everything. If you take a glass of water, right? You drop a penny in that glass of water. The water shifts upwards, doesn't it?
Sure.
It's a fundamental thing. The idea that that which is of lesser density is displaced by that of greater density.
Sure.
Now, if we're talking about different types as kinds of people who prioritize certain kinds of information over others, surely something as fundamental as that should form an aspect of one's motivation.
But at the same time, what if the SE is feminine? What if the SE is the water and the reality is the penny, and they're getting pushed on by the penny?
Okay, but if you were to call SE feminine enough, I would start thinking, okay, how is it definitely different to NE? How's it definitely different to SI?
It's fundamentally different. The fundamental of SE is still there, but the expression of it is different.
Okay, how will that expression necessarily be different? What is the rule you're using, and is it one which is fundamental? Is it something which is
a feminine SE will have less friction with reality. It will cause less impact and will go with the flow a little more with reality. SE in general is really go with the flow. SE in general is really able to roll with the punches.
That's the thing. We would have said SI is more go with the flow.
Yeah. SI will.
That's
will
why
not
I enjoy
want to go with the flow. SI will want to stay in their house and not go and try new things.
But think of it this way, right? You can see it in my behavior, right? I'm not being, for most of this debate, I wasn't being so challenging. I was more interested in learning. I was more interested in going with the flow of what you were also talking about.
Sure.
A natural complement of exploring different possibilities is also allowing that sort of go of the flow.
But this isn't a sensory thing. This is an intellectual thing. What's going on here?
Yes, an intellectual, but it also exists with a background of actually me, rather than trying to push you around, it's me trying to allow things to happen, having a sort of organic development.
Yeah, that's okay. But so let's say,
how would this feel dirty to me? How would going with the flow?
Let's say you're on a construction site, okay?
Yes.
And you have to help build stuff on a construction site. And all the time you have different tasks to do, different jobs to do, different people getting in your way, different stuff. Go do that now, right? So SE in that situation will be in the moment. They'll look at and make sure nothing's falling on their head. They'll be aware of their surroundings. They might not be pushing, but they'll be there, present, aware in the moment, and they'll go with the flow of what their supervisor is saying.
Right. Okay. For that,
on a sports team, the same thing. You'll see.
I actually rather like the idea of some sort of craft, some sort of thing you're working on. We're just going with the flow of it, just working out, organically working. Whereas if I'm working something, immersing myself in it, right? And so I said, no, go do this, I'm doing this. I'm being disrupted continuously.
That's right.
It's jarring. It's very
That's
jarring.
right.
I wouldn't say it's going with the flow. It's the flow is being disrupted each time by someone imposing what they think, what they want me to do each time. Now, I would say, alternatively, I'm more extrovert sensation. Rather than go with the flow, I'm alert. I'm ready to respond and act. Yeah. And I'm in that state of tension. Always. It's not tension
for them. It's not tension for them.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
It's natural. It's real.
I found with extrovert sensation types, the tension is the thing. It's that intensity. But if you're living with tension, you're really alive. If not, you're almost dead. You're dead unless you are almost at the edge, or you're pushing life to its very edge. And we see this. We see this in fictional characters. Look at, say, most anime protagonists. Naruto.
Yeah, I wouldn't use that to type people, but keep going.
These are archetypes that are meaningful to me because they represent people who actually do exist. Not to the degree where they actually have superpowers and all the rest, but that mentality, the idea of pushing yourself right to the edge. You see it with certain skiers. There's this what's her name? Something.
But again, it doesn't have to be pushing yourself to the edge. It can be aware and not pushing yourself to the edge. It can be reactionary too. It doesn't have to be forceful.
It can be reactionary, yes. And it can be pushing yourself to the edge, but also the idea of actually, when you respond in that moment, when you're most alert, is when your adrenaline is pumping. When you're in a situation where you're on the edge, that hormone exists because you're being pushed to the edge.
Well, and so for an NE user, maybe that hormone would bring you into the moment and bring you into the SE or something like that.
No, it does that for that is the science shows that when you have adrenaline pumping, your alertness increases. Your heart level certainly races more. You are more alert. It's a survival, fight or flight mechanism.
Right, but SE SE can also get that, and it will also get that, right? But it's not always on that.
Any person get that. But the point is that SE types live for that high adrenaline experience.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all.
Why not?
I don't think that's what they live for. I think they're just accountable to reality in some way. They're just completely present and in the moment, and they don't need that high adrenaline to be present. Actually, that high adrenaline might not come because they're so present. They might ward off whatever problem was there before. They might catch it before. They might not be jarred because they've seen it.
They might catch it before, but the point is not really worthwhile or exciting unless it's actually being pushed to that sort of moment. If they're just sort of just batting it away, I'm fine, I can handle it, whatever. Is that really a fulfillment? Is it really a motivation?
I think it's again, you have to go back to the pleasure, and you have to go back to the responsibility to get to the way is what pleasure is it getting, and what responsibility is it getting.
That's also something. I know you use responsibility as a way of actually talking about it. And I wonder if it's about just sort of going with the flow, if it's about just sort of taking things as they come and doing what you want.
It doesn't have to be that. It's just one way it expresses, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I do find it's a very sort of rational terminology, this idea of responsibility and a sense of ought, rather simply what is. If it's just reality, why is there responsibility? It just is.
Because someone has to do it. Someone has to take care of this part. And the person to jump up and take care of it first is the one who feels most responsible for it. So like, let's say in a situation, someone's getting out of hand in a social situation, the first person to step up and react is the person who feels most responsible to do that.
Yes.
Right.
So it's not necessarily the case. The first person to step up and react is probably the person who's most alert.
Right. So there you go. There you go. So then you get into alertness is a great idea for what SE is. Just being alert is also very strong.
Yeah, but I know that makes sense because, you know, if your strongest area of taking information is what's going on around you right now, the potential threats, the potential things encroaching, it makes perfect sense. Experimentation is the idea of what's going on. How do I react to it? What do I do?
Yeah.
How do
You'll see it in deer. You'll see it in that they're aware and they're looking around, and they have other deer that aren't SE that are just grazing. And the ones that do notice the threat first will alert everyone else to it.
But that's also the point, you know, threat, the response to threat, overcoming threat.
It's one of the points, yeah. It's one of the aspects that SE can.
That's why we are alert. That's why we've evolved to be alert.
One of the reasons, yeah.
We wouldn't have alertness as a thing.
But same thing, there could be an opportunity. Let's say
it came quite a bit later. But even
let's
then,
say somebody found gold by the river.
Right.
And you're aware and alert of that, and then you run and you get your piece. That's also being alert.
With a deer, if we're trying to get a sense of what's more primal, it makes sense to stick with deer. There is an alertness opportunity. They see food. They see potential green. You know, they'll go towards that. They'll seek out food. Right. They're seeing things which, you know, if I don't do this, I'm not aware of this, I'm going to starve to death. If I don't avoid danger, I'm going to be killed.
Right. But what Socionics describes SE is the deer that fight and battle for supremacy and to be the alpha deer. Whereas that's not what SE is, because there could be a weak deer that's not fighting to battle, but is just alert and aware of its surroundings. So like you have to decide what is SE, because the one that battles isn't necessarily the one with SE.
So the one which is a sort of alert, but sort of also runs away. Because the point is, extra sensation doesn't have to make you a physically strong person.
No, it doesn't at all.
You might not be lucky enough to be born with that sort of thing.
That's right.
Instead, you need that alertness, that awareness of what you need to do in the immediate environment is really what it's about.
That's right. And so then in that context, you can see how it doesn't have to have force.
No, it doesn't have force. It's still about will. It doesn't have to be a physical, muscular strength.
But it doesn't even. It's not even a figurative force. It's just an alertness. It's an awareness. It's a responsibility to what's happening around you at the moment.
Hang on, sorry, someone just coming. Hello. Yeah. So that alertness, when it comes to, for instance, I can see that can work in sort of more of a background effect. But you're naturally alert. You naturally know what to do. How does it then move in sorts of more of a valued motivational sense? Just alertness for the sake of alertness?
I don't think so. I don't know. It's just there. It just is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because for instance, with a demonstrated function, we would say that there are types who are very good and capable of extrovert sensation, who are naturally alert, naturally able to respond in the moment, but they aren't necessarily putting much of a valued pressure on that thing for its own sake. It's more because there's something else they want to do.
Yeah.
I can see the way you're describing extrovert sensation. I could type a lot of LSEs as extrovert sensation types in OP. That'd be extrovert thinking first, and then extrovert sensation being an unvalued but very strong thing. So very much in the moment.
Would be LNE then, no? Or
LIE. Oh, no. We'd say LSE.
LSE is ESTJ.
Yes, exactly. Where extrovert sensation.
That's not extrovert. Oh, demonstrative then.
Exactly.
Not tertiary. Okay.
Exactly. So types who are naturally very much alert in the present have an awareness of that sort of fight or flight, and can, could be more dominant if they wanted to, if they needed to, but they don't have the alertness and know how to do so. But the main thing about them is really about, making things, about seeing how things are actually working in reality, testing things out, trying things out, seeing how it can be improved.
That's part of it,
yeah. And whereas the more valued approach towards extrovert sensation, where it's more of a dominant leading function, is the idea that no, I must respond to my environment. I must be decisive in acting on it and have that impact on my environment.
Yeah, so it's not even only about impact.
Motivation. Yeah.
It's when things go wrong, it's good to have someone with SE that's able to think straight in that situation, to have that clarity.
And the thing is, LSEs and SLEs, both types, are very good at thinking straight. Both are great at solving problems in the immediate here and now. They're great at it. They got that tactical ability. SEs and ESEs as well.
So I personally am a little less good at solving things in the immediate environment. Like I when it happens, I'm good, but it's not what I'm looking for. It's not what I'm going out to search for.
Right. Now I'd say,
but I'm still using SE as a I don't know, as my auxiliary.
I know
if something falls, I find that I've caught it without even paying attention, it will be in my hand, and it's just, for me, it's like magic. It's like all the time my hands are tied, I'm carrying groceries, and I'll just be able to like do a little thing with my hands. I don't even know what I did to untie my hands. It's just an understanding of how reality is.
Okay. Like that of course makes sense. It's just just an understanding which you have. It's just there.
Yeah. It's just there. Like I'll move my head out of the way and something will fly past my head without me even being aware that I did it.
Right, I see. It's interesting. We would, at least in socionics, we say that when something's in the ego block, there's more of a valued, concerted emphasis around it. Like for me, in the same way, I can see long-term outcomes of things reasonably well. I'm good at seeing how things are likely to turn out. I'm good at detaching from the here and now and seeing developments. I'm good at using factual information to sort of make predictive estimates.
Right. That's very NE. Yep.
Yeah. But but I'm saying I don't place much emphasis on this. I'm more interested in finding ways of explaining things in a way which sort of fits together, and exploring different possible ways of looking how things can fit together. That is more what I'm about. It's what we're doing now. I live for that sort of stuff. I don't necessarily live for sort of predictive estimates and crunching the data and seeing what the trends are. Of
course not. Yeah.
No.
But you'll get there anyways, just as a byproduct.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
And what
because you're looking at all of the uncertainties, eventually you'll get to that certainty.
Yes. Although it's certainty. It's
certainty comes as a result, not as a cause.
It's more about clarity than certainty, if that makes sense.
Sure, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
It's because when I say certainty, that's like there are no alternatives, and you're stuck there. And I'd say that might be a bad idea. Instead, I'd say it's more what you have now makes perfect sense. There could be something even better. I just don't know what it is.
Right. Yeah. Certainty is the enemy to any, for sure.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, that makes sense. Oh, so Mitchell made an interesting point here. Sorry. Mitchell said this.
Right. Well, we've passed the 3-hour mark, man. You're worse than Ben Vaserlin now.
Oh my, I'm officially worse than Ben Vaserlin. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh dear. What can we? I don't want to keep you for much longer. I know people have been watching for a while. I think that going to the sensation differences, I just think it makes sort of there's an intuitive sense there that the idea of war and peace can come in. So, or the idea of a hawk and a dove, the attitudes towards the physical world where it's about I'm going into my world as something to fight, to take more, to accumulate more, or I'm going to my world as sort of Winnie the Pooh, where I'm just trying to refine that perfect experience.
Yeah, I don't think so at all. I think people who aren't even using SE can even go into that warlike state, especially as well.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying. I'm not talking about the types now. I'm talking about the concepts behind putting together these cognitive functions.
Again, I can talk about the concepts too. Sorry to say, I just. Oh. Yeah, we saw that. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know how that happened. Sorry, let me turn it off. Okay, I think we should finish up because I know it's also quite late for you.
Yep.
I think it'll be worth discussing that more. I'm not sure exactly the rationale for why you don't see it. One of the problems I found is that I can set out how these ideas make sense next to each other. But
look, I do see it. It's just not in all SE users. And it's not all the time. Like you could probably point at an SE user, 2, 3, 4 of them that do use this, but then I can also point at others that don't. It's just not all present in SE.
It's hard because we'd have to find people who we both type as SE users.
Right.
And if we're using a different metric, then that can be difficult. What is the metric which you use to say that person is an SE user rather than something else? Is that alertness in the day-to-day?
That's part of it, yeah. The other thing is you can just, well, through OP, you can use the coins, right? You don't have to get to SE. Yeah. You can see that they're gathering. You can see that they're sensing, and then automatically that's SE. Right.
That's the thing, because we would say that gather, but how's being alert in day-to-day? How's that gathering?
We don't know. It just happens to be.
Why would that be gathering?
No idea. Doesn't make any sense.
So
but it adds up.
Okay. Oh, sorry. So why is that? If that is the thing about SE users have is that they're alert and day-to-day. How does that follow from them being gathering? Why do they even have to be gathering?
Gathering is just the way you catch. Is the way you catch them.
But how do you know that's the way you catch
them? Okay. So, what are you consuming? Like you consume first, right? What are you consuming? What do you consume when you consume? What are the new things you learn?
Factual information.
Factual information?
Yeah, like how something is, how something's worked. I learn about who did what.
How do you get to the conclusion that it's a factual piece of information?
Well, if I read about it, it's a fact. It's a proposition.
It's a fact if you.
Yeah, right. For instance, I found out something which is quite cool. You know when people fart?
Sure. Yes,
about
of course.
A third of them, if they fart in a flame, they create a blue flame, and the rest is just yellow.
Okay.
Because they produce a different kind of gas in their intestines.
Okay.
As opposed to sulfur. That's a fact.
Sure.
And I'm consuming that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by me consuming? What am I consuming? What am I meant to be consuming?
Well, so the fact is the takeaway for you.
I can see that when I'm putting together an idea in my head and trying to structure a theory. But a lot
and then
of
in the end, you'll get to a fact, and that'll be the takeaway.
Okay, I'd say for me, I crunch facts quite a bit. I take it in. It's quite relaxing for me to do it. I just take in information, and from doing that, I find new possibilities and way to think and make sense of things in my life.
Right.
My life, or not much of my life, for things in general, the systems and structure which I'm working on. I want to see how it all sort of connects together.
Right.
Go on.
So what OP would say is that you're consuming possibilities, concepts, in order to have a factual takeaway in the end.
That does sound a bit forced.
Yeah,
that does sound tilted, because for me, I see almost the opposite. I'm consuming the facts to get to,
And then the other thing is, are you more concerned with freedom or with control?
Are you
more on the side
of when I was younger, I was definitely about freedom. Right. Now I'm far more about, I'm actually more about control, if anything. Right. I've gone from chaotic evil to lawful good.
There you go. Yep.
But
lawful evil. Yeah, chaotic evil to lawful evil, at least.
No, wait, I don't know about the evil. I don't know, but I don't know. I think if I were if I were doing something more evil, I'd probably set up an actual trap for you rather than a discussion, a debate, which ended up being more of a discussion. But I find, yeah, I don't know. I just
So then that's another.
So how
you
that
can
make
catch someone is if they're more on the side of freedom or more on the side of control, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're a sensory dom and you're on the side of freedom, then you're SE. That's another way to catch someone.
Right. Okay. If you, all right. So if you're more libertarian, in other words.
I don't know if it fits into an ideology.
What does it mean? Because that's why I assumed you meant that. Like now, I like a bit more law and order. I'm not an anarchist.
Right, but in your own day-to-day life, if someone was to say that you can't go and do what you want anymore, you can't be free, that's hell for the EP. The EP wants the new. They want to be immersed in the new things.
I don't like having my possibilities limited. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, in that respect, no, fine. I need to.
Right.
No. If I find that certain things are shutting down what could be interesting, for instance, right now we're having a conversation, right? And it's gone way too late.
Way too late.
I sort of need you to sort of say you need to go to bed and let's finish. And
you need me to do that.
And I sort of, because I can't stand to sort of, I could get something more about the conversation, but I realize that's a bad thing. I just know that also I need to go to the loo, and because I'm stuck in the sort of I had too much tea. Because I'm just different ideas, and it's interesting. I'm delaying going to the loo and letting you get to bed.
So now I'm actually causing you to suffer a little bit by not saying goodnight and by keeping things interesting.
I'm not. It's interesting, but I know I'm aware of these other things are sort of being put on the back burner. One, your sleep, two, my bladder.
Right. So why don't you go to the loo and we'll continue this another time. But if we could find a sensory dom that isn't using force and that you can still type as a sensory dom, then maybe that's a good place to start learning that maybe Socionics has an issue with its definition.
We need to find a common ground, I think, for us to then build up and actually find something.
That's right.
I
think the best way to do it is just type someone with inferior NI. Find someone who has inferior NI, type them, and then know that they're SE.
That's a good idea. A good person to start actually is. Oh no, I didn't type him SC. I typed him as Emerson.
I have a few people that I can send your way if you're interested.
Let's finish. Thank you so much, Binyamin, and good night.
Have a good one. Bye.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, everyone else as well.
Thanks, everybody.
And being patient.